Welcome to the ROADSHOW podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the ROADSHOW. We are here today with Dr. Anthony Chaffee.
That's right.
Carnivore, entrepreneur. How are we doing?
Doing well, my friend. How are you?
Going very, very well. I actually have a little bit of a backstory on to why I wanted to talk to you as well. So January comes around this year, and I noticed Joe Rogan's doing the Carnivore month.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I've got to do something. And I'm like, up until January, well, let's say February, I was a freak in the gym. Like, let's go every day. Let's get it done. Lift heavy. Started the carnivore diet. Gains go through the roof. I was like, whoa, what's happening here?
Nice.
Irregular bowel movements go through the roof.
Yeah.
The first 2 weeks, it was explosive. And dude, it was bad. It was really bad. And then my body kind of regulated towards the whole, the diet itself, and it stabilized. And I felt like I didn't have a lot of ups and downs. I kind of just had a lot of like smooth energy. Like I wasn't having, like I stopped coffee and everything. It was really, really good.
Good.
When I did have any kind of like slight variations on meals, like when I would add butter and stuff like that, I did have a bit of a weird time. But at the end of the diet, I don't think I came out of it correctly. Because I'm just a glutton, man.
Yeah.
I'm the biggest glutton you'll ever meet. So I was eating like noodles and everything like the first day out of it, and my body rejected me. So much that I got a diagnosis of Crohn's disease from it.
Wow.
And ulcerative colitis.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty intense. But during that month, you felt good though, from the sounds of it.
Amazing.
Right?
Amazing.
Lovely. So, I mean, that's sort of the primer for people to say, okay, well, maybe this is something that's good for me. Maybe I should just keep doing this and make this sort of a way of life. That's what I did. One of the things that you can find is just like if you drink regularly, you can down half a bottle of scotch or something like that, no problem. But then you don't drink for a month or two, and all of a sudden that you get halfway through that half bottle and you're on the floor puking. Right? Yeah. So, we build up, we build up tolerances to things, and there are, besides alcohol as well. So there are other things in the different things that we eat that can actually have a negative or even toxic effect to us, and we build up resistances to them. And so when we're just in that fighting form and we're just constantly battling this garbage that we're doing that we're putting in our body, we do have some more defenses against that. So then when you go away from that, people do find that they're more sensitive when those things slip back in, because they don't have that defense mechanism. They don't have the tolerance that they used to have. And so you can actually get hit harder. But, seemingly, especially because, now you have the contrast, right? You felt so good during that month. So you felt better than you normally do. You probably have a lot better than you normally do. Most people do. I certainly did. And then all of a sudden you add all that stuff back in, you go full hog, just pasta and noodles and rice and all that sort of stuff. And all of a sudden it really, really hits you a lot harder, and you see that contrast quite significantly. And so it's going to hit you a little harder, probably a lot harder, because you don't have the tolerance that you did before, and you see the contrast. So it probably would have knocked you back lower than where you started at the beginning of January when you were eating sort of, the normal stuff that you were eating. It probably got you lower than that. But if you ate all that crap and you went lower than you were like in December, probably wouldn't be like, oh yeah, I don't really feel that great. But that's in relation to how you normally feel, because you normally didn't feel all that great as compared to where you felt when you were on a full carnivore diet, because that's how you should feel all the time, because that's how our bodies are naturally designed to work. That's biologically what we're designed to eat. And so we're not putting in a bunch of toxins and problems in our body that's going to disrupt our normal physiology.
They call that hormesis, right? The state of like if you're having a regular variable diet of plants and vegetables, you're getting a bunch of like hormetic responses from different plants, right?
That's the cop out of the day by the vegan
Is
community.
it? Yeah. Okay.
So like when I first started talking about this, I was just pointing out that plants use defense chemicals to protect themselves, and that's what they do. It's a biological fact. You can read that in any botany book.
Yeah,
right?
I'm pretty sure Paul Saladino spits that fact a lot.
He does, yeah. And you know, he wrote a book on it and talked a lot about this stuff. So this is a hard fact in a hard science of biology, botany, right? You just look this up, and so a lot of people, they don't have. Well, how can you say that? Well, that's just their own, you know, them just not knowing that. They haven't studied that, and they think it sounds far fetched, but it's not. It's actually a hard fact. You can look this up in textbooks, and you can think about it conceptually, right? We get lost in the woods, and you run out of food. You can't just eat any random plant, right? Most of them will make you very sick or even kill you, and that's why we call most plants on Earth inedible. Right? Correct. So it's edible, inedible. Why is it inedible? Well, because it has poisons. It has poisons that will kill you. Well, you know, people that smoke and drink, well, they don't die that day. Well, obviously, smoking and drinking, but well, that's not poison then, right? But that's the same argument they make about spinach, right? They say, well, spinach, I had a spinach salad the other day. I didn't die. Like, yeah, right. But you didn't die when you smoked a pack of cigarettes either.
Yeah, true.
You didn't die when you had a bottle of whiskey either. But over the years, this will build up the harm and the damage to your body. And we can deal with some of it. Right. But we're eating more and more and more of this stuff, especially because people are saying you need to go plant-based. And so we're inundating ourselves with even more, and our bodies aren't being able to handle it very well. Oxalates are a good example of this. We can't really clear these things. We have a number of different ways, that people, when they've been poor and they haven't been able to access meat as much as like the more wealthy classes, they have figured out ways of using plants and detoxifying them a bit more, making them more bioavailable in their nutrient supply. And but not all things can be detoxified. So like oxalates, you can't really cook them out. You can't really detoxify these things.
What is an oxalate?
Oxalate is a defense chemical. This is a defense that plants use to stop animals and insects from eating them and to kill them, or even from pathogens and fungus and things like that would be invasive and try to eat the plant. And so they release these oxalates that are toxic to other forms of life that are trying to eat them.
Right.
So this can make oxalic acid. Some people have heard of that.
I have, yes.
So that you eat oxalate, that can actually turn into oxalic acid in your bloodstream.
Yeah, okay.
And it's also it can chelate different minerals, right? So it binds to them. Basically, irreversibly, we can't really break that bond. So it will bind magnesium, calcium, things like that, strip that out of your system. And so that actually strip out of your bones, because you have to keep a level of calcium, a certain level of calcium in your serum. And so your oxalates are stripping those out. And then you have to pull from your bones, which is a huge store of calcium in your body, in order to replace and maintain your serum, so you can get osteopenic, osteoporotic, but that's decades down the line, right? So this is causing harm the whole time. What about 75% of kidney stones are calcium oxalate stones? And they say, it's because too much calcium. No, it's too much oxalates, right?
Oh, shit.
Yeah. So, we make some oxalates as sort of a breakdown product of different things, but it's like 2 milligrams or something like that from breakdown of protein, amino acids, and collagen and things like that. Vitamin C, people who take an abundance of vitamin C, that can actually turn into oxalates as well. But then the majority of where we get this stuff is in the plants that we eat, because this is just a natural defense of the plant. So and we've known about the toxicity of oxalates in the medical literature for literally hundreds of years. And going into the 1990s and 2000s, there have been peer-reviewed publications of people going like, hey, we are not paying attention to oxalates as much as we should. This stuff is toxic. We really need to be aware of this. We're calling things, gout and things like that. I mean, like in the 1990s, the head of, I believe it was the head of the Journal of the American Medical Association, published his own paper saying, hey, we're talking about gout as only being these uric acid crystals, because that's not gout. Gout actually has 5 different kinds of crystals that can form in your joints, one of them being oxalate crystals. Right. And so you can have oxalate toxicity that forms into gout, but we just go, gout. And then we call it pseudo gout, just anything that's not uric acid, it has to be pseudo gout. So they've sort of changed the names on that. But that was something that has been well described, well documented, going back literally centuries, and even to the point that we know how much is basically too much. So if you get above 150 to 200 milligrams a day, that's sort of too much. That's sort of overloading your system. You're not really able to clear it that well.
Is that from the actual plant material itself? So 150 to 200 milligrams of plant material, or is that for the actual
ingesting the oxalates? Yeah.
Oxalates themselves.
Yeah, exactly. So
how much do they like normally take up in plant material?
Yeah, so it's different. Yeah, so some plants are quite low in oxalates.
Right.
Some don't. Not all plants use oxalates, but most have like a little bit, and some just have a small amount.
Is that like polyphenols and stuff? Like, is that what oxalates come from?
So oxalates are their own.
Their own complete different chemical.
Yeah, exactly. And there's different kinds of oxalates, but like they're its own class.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
and so, but there are certain things that have very high oxalates. So, like sweet potato, I think like a cup of sweet potato has, a couple hundred milligrams.
Wow.
Spinach, a cup of spinach has about 600 milligrams, right? So this is why Liam Hemsworth put himself in the hospital with 3 weeks of green smoothies, spinach smoothies, just every morning, and he's just pounding these things down. He gave himself a massive kidney stone and obstruction. He had to get surgery to get this removed. And so he'd been, I think, plant-based for a while at that point, but then there's a certain period that he really ramped it up. And so there's the idea in the oxalate, coming from the oxalate researchers that do a lot of research in this, and I'm just repeating their work, is that you have this sort of background level of inundation. You're just sort of giving yourself just a bit more than your body can really handle, or maybe a lot more than your body can handle. And then all of a sudden you'll have a big burst of something like 3 weeks of just 3,000 milligrams of oxalates a day in your smoothies, and it just be okay, that's too much, and you get overloaded, you get this toxicity. But it can cause deposition of these oxalate crystals in your body, in your tissue, and even in your brain, and you can get all sorts of different neurological issues because of that. And and it can deposit in different tissues as well. And then your body seems to try to sequester this. If it can't clear it out through your kidneys, you can start damaging your kidneys, but it can start sequestering this in cells in your tissue to try to just get it out of your system. And so it actually forms like actual crystals, and your body has to attack these things and break them down, and they can start forming these sort of in almost like they would with an infection or a foreign body or something like that, and like it was called a granuloma. So they would just have this body of defense cells sort of wrapped around this, trying to keep that away from the body. And so, even years after you stop eating oxalates, you can get these things dripping into your system and things like that. So it has a long-term effect. And so, it's pretty surprising. But there are these things, and there's plants make about 1 million different chemicals. Most of those are to defend themselves against attack.
We're talking one singular plant?
All of them. Yeah, all. That's
a fuck ton of chemicals.
Yeah, but each individual plant can, easily do over 100,000.
Yeah.
Yeah,
wow.
I mean, coffee has 150,000 different chemicals in it.
Is that a little kick?
Well, it's just something, just something I happen to know about. So, it just has all these things. So we worry about caffeine, but it has thousands of other things that could potentially be of an issue. And so, it's just something to think about. And so I was trying to say this and make this point that this is how plants defend themselves. And historically humans really avoided plants unless we had to eat them. We would eat meat. We were hunters for 3 million years. And then the last 20,000 years after the megafauna died off, we had to go to more hunter-gathering sort of things because we couldn't get like all the big, we couldn't get the big game animals that we were used to.
Especially here in Australia. Fuck all game.
Yeah.
Like none. We've got scrub bulls up north, and I'm pretty sure they're on the endangered list, and you can't touch them anyway.
Yeah.
It's not good.
Yeah. And, and so if you, just here in Australia, if you look at the records from the early explorers, the European explorers that came here like in the 1600s, 1700s, and the missionaries that were here around the same time, there's books written about this, and I've read them. Every time I come across one, I always try to see if there's a chapter on the diet of the native Aborigines, and there generally is. And they just marvel at the fact that they're just eating meat. They only eat meat, and in different areas they were eating specific meat. Now they would say that they knew what plants to use medicinally, and they might use things they knew which plants they could eat safely to survive if they couldn't get meat. But all the accounts that I've seen were all very clear that they said when they had meat, they ate meat. They didn't eat anything else. And in some areas, like in Tasmania, they were actually even more specific. They only ate mollusks. And so they would go diving for abalone and things like that.
Whoa, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and the European sailors, they were like, say, we even offered them like normal, like, swimming fish, and they were like, yeah, no, thanks, we don't want it. Now
we don't want anything that moves.
Yeah, well, and they sort of speculated, is this because they didn't want any of it, or maybe they were just mistrustful of taking food from a stranger, sort of thing. But either way, what they noticed was that they were just eating mollusks. They were just eating the abalone and things like that, and they're quite specific for it.
Right.
Yeah.
So going back on the whole oxalates theory, well, it's not a theory anymore. I guess it's fact.
Yeah.
How can people... Two questions. Can you get rid of them through diet within the body? And how long would that take if that is a strategy?
Yeah. It's really the only way to get rid of it is with diet. You just have to start limiting or reducing the amount of oxalates you're eating. Now, I don't eat any oxalates because of the way I eat. I only eat meat. But that's not necessarily something that everybody wants to do. And so, yes, but you do need to reduce the amount of oxalates that you're eating. Try to bring that down below 200 milligrams a day. Then your body can start healing its tissue, stop having to clear so much out of your kidneys that it's actually physically damaging your kidneys. Right. And then it can start, at that point, sort of heal it. And then you can reduce it down from there. And then you'll start actually clearing it from your tissue. So there's a lady, Sally Norton, who wrote literally the book on oxalates, just came out last year. And it's called Toxic Superfoods, like all these superfoods that we talk about. That book. Yeah. So it's just showing like, hey, these superfoods, we call them superfoods, they're actually toxic. Yeah. And it's like oxalates are actually, and she put forward so much data and research. I mean, literally hundreds and hundreds of references. I think over 600 or 800 references to different studies and things like that. And so it's, and she goes through that, and she actually has a protocol in her book on how to sort of do this safely. And because if you go down to like no oxalates right away, your body will say, okay, great, we're going to start getting rid of these oxalates. They start sort of getting it out of your tissue, and you start clearing it out of your kidneys. But that can actually be too hard on your kidneys if you've battered your kidneys for years and years and years with all this oxalates and things like that. You need a bit of time to heal. And so what she recommends is sort of coming down gradually and sort of reducing, getting down to that point, maybe half your oxalate consumption, every week, and then get down to that, 100 to 200, milligram range. Do that for a while, let your body heal. In that range, you're not going to be storing more oxalates, but you're also not going to be dumping a lot of oxalates, and so you can give your body a chance to heal. Yeah,
like an equilibrium kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I like it.
And so you can heal at that point. And then once your kidneys are better and your body's better in other ways, then you can start reducing the oxalates down even more, and then your body's going to start flooding these things out. And it seems to happen in weird patterns. Like sometimes your body will just dump out like a lot more oxalates at certain times. It's hard to really tell how it's going to hit people. So there's this idea of oxalate dumping when people go into a very low oxalate diet, or even like just a full carnivore diet, which is a zero oxalate diet, that they can actually get worse oxalate symptoms. They'll notice like, yeah, actually I have these oxalate symptoms. They go on a carnivore diet, they feel amazing, they feel better. And then a few months into it, they go like, ooh, I'm getting all those oxalate symptoms again. And that's, because their body's sort of dumping this stuff out. Now, I haven't noticed that myself. Or in my patients, I haven't noticed a huge number of those. I certainly have seen that in some people that, a year or two down the line, or even 6 months down the line, they're doing great, and they're like, wow, I'm having these problems. Sometimes there's other issues that we can sort of troubleshoot, and they get back on track and everything's fine. Right. At other times we do all the troubleshooting, we take care of all the basics, they're doing everything right, everything's going great, they're still having a problem. They go, okay, well, we need to think about oxalates, because oxalates the oxalate dumping, oxalate toxicity, it can affect any organ in your body.
Right.
And so it's very vague. And so, it's one of those things that I think that you sort of have to come to, you need to think about. It needs to be on your differential, but there are obviously other things that can cause these things too. So you knock those things out. Okay, it's none of those things. Great. Let's think of oxalates. And then, I've put a couple people on that protocol that Sally Norton recommends, and they got better.
Okay.
A lot of the other ones we troubleshot, and it was something else, but that was in the back of my mind, what if this is oxalates? One thing that Sally said is that if someone's having like a high calcium diet, because calcium can actually help you get rid of oxalates, because the oxalates bind to the calcium and strip that out. So if you're taking in calcium supplements, or maybe having a lot of dairy or something like that, other things that contain a lot of calcium, that can actually cause more oxalates to start coming out and shedding.
Interesting. Because it can bind to the calcium.
Yeah.
So you can digestively get rid of them through taking in more calcium, but it would incur more issues.
It could, yeah, especially at the level of the kidney, right? Because that's where you're going to excrete it from.
Yes.
Right. And so she was saying that there's actually some people who years after they went like on a carnivore diet, they started like taking in calcium, and all of a sudden, bang, they got these oxalate symptoms, and they got these kidney stones. Damn. And it's calcium oxalate stones. Yeah. Right. And so that was, but it, not everyone gets that, but it's just something to think about that. And she was saying, because I actually spoke to her the other day about this, but she was saying that, having some calcium that can help draw this stuff out. Okay. And so, but it can come at a bit too fast, so you got to sort of see, but
come at some cost of feeling it coming out. Yeah.
But for some people, but not everybody. Not everybody's going to have like a detriment from that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of interesting how the body can store something for so long and then react to it after the fact of the healing happening. Like, what I'm saying is you've stopped taking in these oxalates. Mm-hmm. And then they stay dormant for a period of time until you add calcium, mm-hmm. and then they start reacting, and that's just wild to me.
Yeah, well, she thinks that might be why people that go into a carnivore diet from like a plant-based diet, which is going to be very high oxalate diet, right. that they have a bit of a delay. Maybe they don't have as big of symptoms because there's not a huge amount of calcium in meat. If you're having dairy and things like that, then that's a different story. But some people that are just doing meat and water, maybe they're not noticing things. It could be years down the line, and then they start dumping a bit more and getting a bit more out, especially if they start adding in calcium or taking a calcium supplement or something like that. She said that she's seen that, even years down the line, and then they, can even test, and they have, more oxalates in their urine and things like that. It's very hard to test for oxalates, because it's a bit unreliable, and because it's not something that we've really thought of as a mainstream problem. This is known about. It's definitely known about in certain circles, but it's not one of the the thing, like the normal things that people would think about and look for. So we don't have very robust tests for it. I think it's probably more to do with the fact that people haven't necessarily thought it was as big of an issue as it is, and so hopefully we'll get better testing for that. But it is difficult to test for it, and also it can be sequestered in different tissues, and so it's just like, what do you test and all that sort of stuff.
That's what I was going to say. I've had a microbiome test before. Mm-hmm. When you send a stool sample mm-hmm. for testing, they test the microbiology of the stool, and apparently in some laboratories they can test for like oxidative pathways and stuff. Mm-hmm. Is that real? Can they actually test for that stuff for like certain pathways? Because like I went and used Viome. Have you heard of Viome?
Is that like a probiotic sort of thing?
No, a Viome is a testing facility. Okay. And they take a stool sample, and then they'll give you a menu of what you can eat because of what you have in your microbiology that's reacting in certain ways. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, this sounds great. The entrepreneur that created the whole setup was very convincing in his argument. But
he would be. He's trying to sell you something.
He's trying to sell something for sure.
Yeah. So the thing with the microbiome is, the microbiome of a lion doesn't dictate its meals, right? It's just like, well, excuse me, Leo, like this biome, you actually should have like a coriander and chicken, it's just like, well, maybe their biology is set up the way it's set up. And, every single day that you eat, if you eat something different, you will have a different microbiome at the end of the day, because bacteria, this turnover is 20 minutes, right? True. And so they rely on what we send down the pipe, right? And so if you eat different things, you'll have a different biome every day. So whatever day you take that test, you'll have a different result. You know, if you eat something, you know, curried chicken this day, you send it in, you're going to have a different result. You have, you know, a vegetarian meal that day, you're going to have a different result. You're just eating lean, you know, just steaks with no seasonings, you're going to have a different result. So, you know, the microbiome that they've tested in you know, carnivores and different sort of people that only eat meat or animal products, it's actually quite a good profile. So you have you know, all the different, it's very, very diverse. You have all these different sorts of a lot of different bacteria. You're not supposed to have an overgrowth of, you know, a few.
Yeah.
And they seem to be the ones that are correlated with better health. Now, is this because the bacteria themselves play a role in contributing to our health, or is it that what we're eating has a direct effect on our health? And that also has a direct effect on what bacteria are going to be living in our gut. I think it's probably both. Certainly, whatever we eat plays a huge role in our health, and it also dictates what microbiome we have.
Yeah.
Right. But there have also been studies in mice where they had, you know, particular gut bacteria, and there's some bacteria they thought was associated with like obesity, and so they put that in these like identical mice, these lab mice that with the same exact genetics,
Right.
fed them the exact same things, exact same conditions, and the exact same amounts. And the one that had this weird little bacteria in it got fat as hell. You know? So it's like,
Interesting.
well, yeah, very strange and very interesting. So I think there is an impact that the microbiome has.
That's fascinating.
As well.
Just
yeah.
one slight variation of
Yeah.
bacteria.
Yeah. So it's just the microbiome, they changed that. And that microbiome seemed to change enough in how that animal processed this food that something very different happened. And we do see associations with different bacteria in our microbiome and certain diseases. And generally, those are the bacteria that are fed by fiber and carbs and things like that. A lot of these ones that feed on fiber and carbs are associated with a lot of different autoimmune diseases, like multiple sclerosis. And so people are saying, you know, is this something at that level? I don't know, but I do know that I have a lot of patients when they go on a carnivore diet or elimination diet and they remove out everything except meat, salt, and water, or even just meat and water, that their autoimmune issues just go away. And there's a lot of arguments for that as well, such as the different toxins that are in plants, such as lectins. Lectins are a huge body of molecules, a whole different class of molecules, a whole bunch of different kinds of lectins. There are actually lectins in meat as well, but they don't seem to cause harm. But the lectins in plants definitely do cause harm. So this is like, you know, gluten, right? So that's a lectin, and that can damage our gut in a number of different ways. Ricin is also a lectin.
It's also a poison, isn't it? Ricin?
It is the most poisonous thing that we know of.
Yeah.
1 microgram per kilogram of body weight can kill anybody.
Jesus.
And so, yeah, it's been used as a poison for a very long time.
Pretty sure that's how they got Kim Jong-il.
Is that, yeah. Yeah. Well, and you know, and you get these like letters being posted to politicians and things like that, and they have like ricin dust in them. You know, yeah, it's extraordinarily deadly.
And we're eating that shit.
Yeah. Well, lectins in general, yeah. And that's the thing too, other beans. So ricin comes from castor beans, right? And so other beans have a lot of lectins as well. And this makes a bit of sense, right? Because a bean is a seed, and a seed is a plant's baby. And every organism protects their babies more than anything.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Shit.
And so this is where you generally find the highest concentration of toxins. And in fact, it's in the casing of the castor bean. So that's the barrier protection. Something's trying to eat in and get at that seed, get at that baby. It's like, you're going to die. Right? So that's where like the main defenses are. And so these other lectins, there's a lot of other lectins that exist in beans as well.
Why isn't placenta poisonous?
Placenta.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, because the thing is, it doesn't necessarily need to be, right? Because, you know, animals are kinetic. We can run away, move around, fight back, or hide. And so our flesh doesn't need to be poisonous. I mean, some animals may have poison sacs and things like that, but that's a specific organ that's sequestered away from the rest of the body.
So our defense chemical is move the fuck away from it. Yeah. Okay. Right.
Yeah. So all living things have a defense, right?
Yeah.
All down to single-celled organisms. And while animals can run away or fight back, plants can't. So they have to protect themselves by other means. And one of the main means they have is that chemical defense. Now they can be woody and harsh and have spines and thorns, or be hard to access, or they can hide their nutrients in ways that aren't bioavailable to us. Like, like what is wood? That's cellular. This is fiber, right? And this is actually what they put in processed foods to increase the fiber content. They put a sawdust. That's a true story.
Really?
Yeah, because that's fiber. It's cellulose, right? And so they put sawdust in this filth, and because that's been classed as an essential nutrient now. So fiber is a so-called essential nutrient. And what essential nutrient means is if you do not eat it, you will die.
You will die, yeah.
Right. And so, tell that to the Inuit, right? Like, there's no fiber to eat up there anyway.
No, it's not even a tree.
No, exactly. Hey guys, just want to take a second to thank our sponsor, Carnivore Bar. I don't promote many products because honestly, all you need to be healthy is to just eat meat. For those times that you're out hiking, road tripping, or stuck at work and you want a nutritious snack that is just meat, fat, and salt if you want it, the Carnivore Bar is a great option. So I like this product not because it's just pure meat, but also because I want the carnivore market to thrive as well. And the more we support meat-only products, the more meat-only products there will be available in the mainstream. So if this sounds like something you'd like to get behind, check it out using my discount code Anthony to get 10% off, which also applies to subscriptions, giving you 25% off total. All right, thanks guys. And so, that's the thing. So what is fiber? What is cellulose? It's strings of glucose, right? Well, we use glucose. That's great. Sugar, we use that. Glycogen, that's strings of sugar as well. It's just glucose molecules, right?
Is glycogen glucose? Oh,
it is, yeah. Chains of glucose, but it's the animal storage molecule of glucose, whereas cellulose is the plant storage molecule of glucose. Right. And so the problem with the plant storage molecule of glucose is that no vertebrate animal can break that bond. Those glucose molecules are just bound in just a certain way that we don't have the enzymes to break that bond.
Isn't that what the pancreas was for? Not the pancreas, the appendix.
Yes, but the appendix is where it is in other primates that are actually herbivorous, unlike ourselves.
Like gorillas and that.
Gorillas, chimpanzees, the appendix is very long. It's actually a cecum, and so that's a full, large cecum. It's like 4 feet long or so.
Oh, wow.
And that's where a lot of fiber will pack in, and they'll cultivate certain bacteria that actually eat the fiber because they can't break down the fiber either. The bacteria break it down, the bacteria eat it, and then they produce, as a result, basically their waste, their feces, if you will, is short-chain fatty acids, which are 100% saturated. And that's what the gorilla absorbs.
So that's why they're huge.
That's why they're jacked, because and then the bacteria die off and they absorb that as proteins. Right. So they're eating fiber, which are strings of glucose, but what they're absorbing is fat and protein, right? We can't do that, right? Because we haven't eaten these things in millions and millions of years. So our cecum is shriveled down to a little appendix. So we don't have that ability anymore. And so we need to get fat and protein from something else. Fat and protein runs the animal kingdom, really mostly fat, because gorillas that just eat green leaves, they get 70% of their calories from saturated fat, from those short chain fatty acids. Cows get nearly 80%. And primates, the larger the brain of the primate, the larger proportion of fat is in their diet. So gorillas actually have the smallest brain in proportion to their body, and they get 70%. All other primates get more of that, more of a higher percentage of fat in their diet as a calorie.
So is that kind of why the whole fat-free thing really ruined the IQ of society?
Probably did. Yeah. Well, it's not helping. And I mean, saying we don't eat fat, things like that. I mean, when I was a kid was when things were first going on. Oh, don't eat fat, don't eat fat, don't eat fat. But my parents were still, kids need to drink whole milk. But we drank skim milk, and now because we're not supposed to have fat. But my mom would always say, kids do need whole milk though, because they need that fat to grow their brain. Well, when you're 5, your brain's still growing. So you probably still get the fat. But there's studies down in Africa and India where they had controlled trials. And they had very impoverished kids that weren't getting all that much food, and certainly not a lot of animal protein and fat. And So it was a controlled trial, right? So they studied different kids in the same situation, and so they gave randomly. So it was a randomized controlled trial. They gave some of these kids 1 egg a day, 1 extra egg a day, just 1 egg.
Right.
And they followed these guys for over a year, and they found that the ones who got the egg increased their IQ by 15 points on average.
What?
Just 1 egg a day.
Damn.
Right. So they want to do that as a campaign to sort of impress upon the parents of these children, because people would raise chickens to grow eggs so they could sell the eggs because they were desperate for money. Yeah. And they were like, hey, really hold back at least 1 egg a day. This is really important to your kid's development. And so that was what that was used for, but I think it's very useful for everyone else to understand as well. That's how vital and important animal nutrition is, and animal source nutrients and fat and protein are. And the bioavailability is all there. Like an egg is a perfect protein. It has all the proteins that you need in the exact proportion that you need them. It has all the fat and cholesterol that you need, because that's all the nutrients that you need to grow a new animal life, right? It's all right there, all packaged. And now people are saying, well, actually all those things are toxic and cancerous. Well, then why doesn't that grow into a cancer cell instead of a chicken?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. What's the argument between raw egg? Because I've heard it a bunch of times. People that drink raw eggs and then cook eggs. Is there a difference between how you consume them?
Yeah. I mean, there's an argument for, against drinking raw yolks, because there's some chemicals in there that seem to act as a bit of a deterrent or defense. It's
like the Rocky thing back in the day. Look,
and I've done that. It's not that bad. It's cold, but if you break up the eggs and sort of whip them up, exactly. It just tastes like cold scrambled eggs.
Okay.
So basically, it's not that bad. You put it in a blender, it's all like creamy. Not that bad.
True.
And so I don't have a problem with that. Some people have problems with that. People that have with autoimmune issues tend to have more of an issue with egg whites. And now, is that because of the egg white itself, or is that because that nearly all chickens, egg-laying chickens, are fed corn and soy and crap like that, which they're not designed to eat either. And so they're not going to be as healthy as they can be, and that egg is not going to be as healthy as it can be. And there was a guy I saw, he was a regenerative farmer.
Joel Salatin?
I can't remember his name, but he was giving a talk at Hillsdale College in the U.S. And he was talking about, and he's not carnivore, but he's just talking about the importance of raising things in a certain way and how this is actually better for the environment, because you can grow healthier, more nutritionally dense animals and plants in a smaller area if you do it right. Yeah. Right?
The movable cages and that.
Yeah. So maybe you have like 4 pastures and you keep your cows and your sheep in this one, and then after a couple of days you move it to the next one, and the next one, and the next one, exactly. And then a couple of days later you put the chickens in, and there's all these feces, all these flies and bugs going after the feces, and then they go after eat all the bugs, and you're upscaling that.
That's one of the methods of polyphase farms. That's how they raise all their cattle and their chickens and all that. And apparently, like the yolks in the eggs are like the brightest you've ever seen, like super nutritious, dense eggs. And
stuff. So this guy was talking about that. So his eggs, he gave a comparison, and I believe the numbers were that the amount of folate that was normally like the national average in the U.S. was like 41 milligrams of folate. And normally people say, oh, that's a good amount of folate. Eggs have, good amount of folate.
Yeah.
His eggs had over 1,000.
Damn.
Yeah, so it's like just, more than 20 times the amount of nutrient density. And so you see this in animals as well. They'll just get much more nutrient dense. So, it is the problem that people are having with egg whites, from the whites itself? Is that something that's always going to be there no matter what? Or if it's actually fed what's supposed to be fed, is it going to be better? I don't know.
Do anti-nutrients like soy, do they translate into like eggs? Like
yeah.
Does that get held within the egg whites and stuff as well?
Yeah. And so I think that's certainly a large part of this. And so this is why people, especially with autoimmune issues, is good canary in the coal mine. People with autoimmune issues, because they're much more sensitive to these things, because their body's reacting to something, and they're creating antibodies, and those antibodies through molecular mimicry are cross-attacking and cross-reacting with their body.
Right.
And so you can actually see this. You can actually remove these things, put somebody on a pure elimination diet, only give them the nutrients they need, nothing else, and they don't have autoimmune issues anymore. And that's been shown in large clinical trials in humans. Mm. And so it does seem that people with autoimmune issues can still be sensitive to things like pork and chicken and farm-raised fish, and but really in the normally fed ones that are fed a bunch of corn and soy and crap like that. They're not designed to eat this stuff either. So they're not going to be as healthy as they can be. They're not going to be able to detoxify this stuff as well as they would be able to detoxify the plants that they're actually accustomed to eating, because all plants and animals are in an evolutionary arms race. Plants becoming more and more poisonous, so less and less animals can eat them. Yeah. Okay. And animals are becoming more and more adapted to specific poisons in specific plants, so they can eat that plant and survive and thrive. And that's their dedicated food source, right? So this is why koalas eat eucalyptus and nothing else eats eucalyptus, right? True. But they don't eat anything else either, right? And then pandas did just eat bamboo. Nothing else really eats bamboo, maybe some insects and things like that. But they're very specific. Animals in the wild eat extremely specifically.
That's actually a good point. I saw an elephant push over a tree in like really dense jungle just to get the leaves at the top of this one tree. Right. And it was like a specific tree. Yeah. And it wouldn't eat anything else around it. It's just one of these one leaves. That's a really interesting point. Yeah. I wanted to ask quickly, how important is folic acid and folates inside of the diet? Because I didn't eat a lot of organ meat when I was doing the carnivore diet, and I felt like everyone was talking about it, and maybe I should have attributed a little bit of my portion of my diet to that.
Most people do fine with just skeletal muscle, meat, and fat. I hardly ever eat organs. Very, very rarely. I think I've had beef liver or lamb liver, 3 times in the last decade. So, but that being said, some people are going to need a little bit more. I think pregnant women or women that want to get pregnant, you don't want to mess around with your folate. And so you need to check. And so that's the thing too. You don't need to guess at these things. You don't need to sort of wonder and guess and like, oh, maybe I should take these vitamins, because just check. You can just check your vitamins. You can check your minerals. You can check all these sorts of things, especially if you're coming from, the standard Western diet, which is very nutrient deficient. We're overfed but undernourished, as has been said. We're getting abundance of calories and a paucity of nutrients, right? So most people are nutrient deprived. This is actually being reflected in our blood work. Our blood results are our reference ranges, because reference ranges that we use are so stupid because they're not actually arranged for good health. It's not like, well, we figured out that this is the range of optimal humanity, right? This is how much magnesium that you really need. This is how much zinc or B12 that you need. No, they go by average in the community. So it's so stupid. What? Yeah, I swear to God. So, the first 2,000 or so people that come into a lab, that's your reference range.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
What if they're all slobs?
They are all slobs. That's the problem.
Man.
I mean, think about who's getting these tests, right?
Yeah, true.
And they're not all well baby checks.
No,
right?
no.
They're people that are like, I'm not really feeling too well. Well, let's check your this person's anemic and they're not doing well. And like, well, let's check your B12. Oh, your B12 is whatever it is. Well, if everyone's getting their B12 checked who are in that position, well, then obviously the reference range is going to be low. Damn. Right. And so, when you think about the fact that, and this is why different labs in the same area will have different reference ranges, right? And I always wondered that. And it was like in medical school, I was like, that's stupid. Why would you have different reference ranges? It should just be a reference of health. Like, well, they have difference because they have differences in their community. I'm like, but there shouldn't be a difference in humanity. There shouldn't be a difference in what's optimal for human life, right? I agree. And so, and that's why, is because what they're actually doing is they're looking for the average in the community. Mm-hmm. However, 90% of Americans have at least one metabolic illness. Australia's pretty close to that too. And over 70% of Americans are overweight or obese. And Australia's right around there as well.
We're the little brother.
Yeah.
We're adopting Taco Bell and Wendy's, so it's heading this way.
That's it. And so, America was sort of an early adopter of these really stupid protocols that came in. They said that, 1977, USDA said that fat causes, cholesterol and saturated fat cause heart disease. Stop eating them. So we really got rid of fat. We got rid of red meat and eggs, because those were the worst, right? Because they had the most saturated fat and cholesterol. Well, actually, it turns out they're the best. But we significantly reduced those by over a third since the 1970s, increased high fructose corn syrup by over 3 times, increased seed oils by over 3 times, increased fruits and vegetables by 30-40% respectively, and increased grains and all that sort of stuff as well. And what happened? Right, the obesity rate tripled, heart disease tripled, stroke rate tripled, cancer rates tripled, type 2 diabetes, autoimmune disorders, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, even neurodevelopmental delays such as autism all increased exponentially. They almost didn't exist before the 1980s, and now they're the only things we treat by and large. And but then the UK followed suit in 1983, and other Western countries followed suit after that. So we're at the head of that rush, into hell, but everyone else is close behind, right? And so if you're looking at reference ranges, that's not what you want to look at. You don't want to look at a reference range for the average, because the average person is sick. The average person is unwell. And so a lot of people are actually nutritionally deficient and they don't even realize it, right? So here in Australia, if you get your B12 check, the reference range generally is around 160 to 620, 630. Yeah. And that's normal. Okay, so that's the normal range. Pretty low though, right? Below 400, you get neurological damage and demyelination of your nerve cells. Yeah. So how is that normal? Yeah, it's not right. So 400 to 160, right? So 230 points, 230, 240 points. That is severe deficiency, right? That is a clear clinical deficiency that you can get brain damage from, right?
And that's the operating levels of the majority.
That's it. And so you go in there and, you may be a vegetarian or plant-based or vegan or even just eating normal processed crap, right? Which is all plant-based, really, I mean, like the meat is the only saving grace in all of those things. Yeah. But that's what gets blamed on it. They do all these studies and they say, well, if you reduce, they call, because pizza toppings sometimes have meat, so they say, well, pizza's meat. And fast food, the burger has meat in it, fast food's meat, right? Well, no, but there's a bun and there's sugary sauces and there's, French fries, deep fried in seed oils or even trans fats. They did that for a few decades. Yeah. That was fun. and then, a big sugary drink, right? Or diet drink that has, a bunch of nasty stuff in it. Yeah, exactly. So, but they're blaming meat for the problem, right? But obviously that's not the only thing. So they say, and there's no fiber in those things either. So they say, oh, when you eat more fiber, we need more whole fruits and vegetables, people get better. Yeah, because you're not eating junk food. Yeah. Right. So yes, fruits and vegetables are better than junk food.
Advertisements for it, they would put sausages and bacon and stuff on a barbecue, and then it would pan to a lady frying up cigarettes, and she's like, this is kind of what you're doing with the meats.
Yeah, it really isn't. Yeah.
It's really not it.
Yeah. Yeah, there was that was in What the Health. That's such a filthy, rotten movie.
Here's a question I've got for you. Yeah. I watched What the Health and I stopped drinking milk because somewhere near the end of it, they were saying that whole raw milk contained, I think it was 1,000 parts per million of pus. Mm-hmm. And I hear information now that whole raw milk is the best milk that you can get, so much so that it's actually hard to find.
Mm-hmm. And for some reason illegal in Australia.
And illegal.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What the hell is that about?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I don't know why they went with that, but why they made it illegal. But it's no. I mean, look, we're mammals. Mammals drink milk, right? You don't necessarily drink it after you're weaned, but to argue that milk, which is literally the stuff of life for mammals, is somehow toxic and dangerous, and oh my god, it looks like pus. I mean, first of all, who gives a shit? It's just it's oh, you look in the microscope, it looks like pus. Fucking and I mean, does that mean it's bad for me?
Everything under a microscope looks bad.
It's just who cares? And the Game Changers thing. They say oh, this guy had a bean burrito and this guy had a meat burrito, and then we took their blood and we spun it and we spun it in a centrifuge. Oh, look at this one. This one looks so good. It looks so nice. Oh, this one's gross. To who? Yeah. What? I mean, what objective markers are you saying? Well, this one looks good and that one looks bad. Yeah. But they said this one looks terrible. Oh, this one looks horrible. Says who? Yeah, and then people watching that go oh, that one looks bad. To who? Because I can tell you that one thing we definitely don't do in medicine is centrifuge these things. Go, let me take a look at that. I have never once done that.
You don't do that?
No. I've done that in chemistry class
in
my undergrad,
Yep.
and then we looked at these sorts of things. But no, that's ridiculous. That's a ridiculous thing to say. And it's making just a bizarre claim. Oh my God, it has all this stuff with pus. Okay, what is pus? Pus are I mean, this is just pissing me off more than I say it. But like, what is pus, right? Pus are your white cells.
True.
They're your immune cells. What is milk providing to the baby animal? It's providing,
Immunity.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's actually conferring and passing on the immune system of the mother onto the child, and you do this in the form of immune cells, and also in antibodies, right?
True.
So the baby is protected from what the mom is protected from, right? Oh my God, there's all this, this crap. Yeah, it's supposed to be there, dude.
Yeah, it's an environmental thing, right? Because the mother also would have a reflection in a microbiome from, well, not even just in the microbiome, in the whole system of the cow, from the environment that she lives in.
Yeah.
So like all of the stress hormones, everything like that. So I'm guessing when a calf sucks on the teat of a cow, it's also realizing, actually, we're getting a lot of, what would you call it? Cortisol and stuff like that. So you're like, oh shit, we're in a stressful environment. Maybe, I don't know.
Well, I mean, a mom, in the wild, the mom's nipple is not going to be clean. You're going to get, a bit of like, the surface bacteria, but like, your biome, we have tons of bacteria in and on us at all times. And, you cultivate a different, microbiome on you and around you and in your mouth and in your intestines, in your private parts, that depending on how healthy you are and what you eat, this is why, women may have, like a yeast infection, candida infection, because their microbiome in their vagina becomes out of whack and they can't sort of hold off these weird things. And you get that in your mouth as well. People get cavities and things like that. That's from having incorrect bacteria in your mouth that then damage and eat away at your enamel. And that comes from eating carbohydrates and fiber and things like that.
Yeah, true.
And so when, think about an animal in the wild with their teeth. You lose your teeth in the wild, you're dead. Like you can't eat, you can't fight, you can't hunt, you can't do anything. All right, you're done. Okay, so when that happens, that's a big deal, right? So animals, they don't have dentists, right? They don't have a pack of benevolent veterinary dentists going around like cleaning teeth and things like that, and tranquilizing lions and leopards and like scrubbing their teeth in their sleep.
But they always seem to have really, really clean teeth.
They do, yeah,
and always straight.
Yeah. Good point, because why are we the only animal that have crooked teeth?
Yeah.
Crooked, broken, yellow, rotting teeth, right? Because we're eating the wrong things. Crooked teeth and underformed jaws are purely nutritional. Well, there's some from like chewing and stimulating that, like eating the right things and getting something, like eating meat and having that sort of thing, not just eating soft, highly palatable crap.
Yeah.
You need that pressure in the mouth in a certain way to help stimulate growth, but also you need the nutrients. So you need vitamin K2 and K1, calcium, and D3. These all work together in concert to grow your jaw and your teeth. And if you don't get enough of that, and most people are not getting enough vitamin K2, which is only fat soluble, it only comes from animals. People say, oh, well, there's a whole bunch of vitamin K and kale and things like that. They have vitamin K1. We need vitamin K2.
Right.
And there's only about a 1% conversion from K1 to K2. And so you're just not going to get it. And
vitamin K also makes vitamin D3 more bioavailable, correct?
Yeah, it has a lot of interactions with calcium as well as vitamin D as well. This is why you'll generally see vitamin D3 come with K2. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so very important vitamin, right? It also has to do with coagulation in our blood. This is a precursor to our coagulation factors in our blood.
Right.
And so like warfarin counteracts that, knocks out vitamin K2, and so we can't make as much coagulation factors. So that's how that works. And so if you're not getting enough of this stuff, you're going to get crooked teeth, you're going to get smaller jaw, you're not going to get your wisdom teeth in.
Yeah.
All the fossils before the agricultural revolution, big wide jaws, all had the wisdom teeth, all had full sets of teeth. In fact, some of the remains that we have are really only teeth. Because everything else went away and the teeth were there. There's the hardest part of the body. And they didn't rot, they didn't go away, they didn't get cavities, they didn't get crooked teeth. And then agricultural revolution came, there's a clear split. So archaeologists can actually tell the difference between a skull before and after the agricultural revolution.
Damn.
Based on that, yeah.
Wow.
And so, yeah, it just had rotten, broken, crooked teeth, right? So it's not genetic. It's not genetic. You know, what animal in the wild has crooked teeth? None.
No, none. Do you know Ben Greenfield? Have you heard of him?
I know the name. I don't think I've come across much of his stuff.
Ben Greenfield, he's like a biohacking genius. Like the guy just biohacks everything. And he came across the book Breathe.
Okay.
And it's all about what you were just describing, how the jaws are actually getting smaller since the agricultural revolution. And there's a palate divider. Have you seen this before?
No, I don't think so.
It's actually kind of crazy. There's like it's almost like a reverse vice that you put inside your jaw at the top.
Oh,
and you
right.
turn it and it breaks open the palate.
Yeesh.
And this guy's got like an extra 5 nickels worth of bone in his face just from these things. And like he did it after the age of 21.
Oh, wow.
Oh, what am I doing? Trust me, having to Google. I normally have a dude sitting there, but we're moving this whole studio. So I was like, don't worry about coming in today. I can always edit this out. Yeah, so it's like that.
Oh, crazy.
Yeah, crazy, right?
Yeah.
Just like from eating tender steak, they
Yeah.
we don't have the separation anymore. Yeah, and this guy has like he kind of has broken it down. If you can get your children to chew like hard things, like they have a type of gum, and I can't remember what it's called. I'll put it on the screen if I remember to. And it's non-nutrient based, and it doesn't have any kind of like, I think it's like proper for carnivore people, you know?
Yeah.
And you just chew it only on the one side. Apparently if you chew on both sides at the same time, it can be a stress response. So you chew on one side for like 10 minutes and it's like a really hard gum kind of thing. And it develops the children's jaws because we don't have you don't cook a rump steak for a kid and just like, just char grill the shit out of it. You know? Kids won't eat it.
Yeah. But soft veggies, you boil all this crap and they're just eating, just vegetable slurry. There's no chewing involved, right? They're just eating very, very soft things. So even just eating meat, that's actually a lot harder than these other things, which is funny too, because that's why we actually have smaller jaws, smaller teeth than other apes, right? Like gorillas and chimpanzees, because even though we came from a similar background, we started having more adaptations to do with carnivory, right? Because we were eating softer and softer food, right? So a gorilla is just chewing on sticks and leaves all day. I mean, that's very tough. It's just this big fibrous thing. They're just chewing and chewing and chewing. They're eating something like 60 pounds of leaves a day.
Damn.
So chewing tons of this stuff because it's very nutrient poor. It's just horrible nutrition. It's so poor, in fact. And people say, like, oh, well, if you just eat dirty leaves, you can get B12. Nope, sorry.
That's not real?
No, you're not going to get enough. Maybe you get a bit, but I mean, again, like a vegan sort of has a B12 of 200. They're, oh, it's perfectly fine with what I'm doing. It's not. And so gorillas, they're eating dirty leaves all the time, right? They're not spritzing this stuff, and cleaning it off before they eat it. But they don't get enough B12 from what they're eating. And they eat 60 pounds of leaves a day.
Damn.
These vegans aren't eating 60 pounds of leaves a day. No. But it can take like 8-9 years before you completely deplete out your B12 to get to the point that you're actually in a state of crisis. So that's why
I'm having hemp oil, man.
Yeah. What's that? Bro, fine then. That's perfectly fine. Yeah. At least that's obviously what we evolved on, was hemp oil, and get all of the nutrients that you need from that. And so gorillas, they don't get all the B12 that they need from eating that.
So we're definitely not going to.
No, and one of the arguments that people make is like, oh, well, actually, there's some bacteria in your gut that can make B12, so that's fine. Okay, that bacteria is in your colon. You absorb B12 in your small intestine, just like a gorilla does, right? So a gorilla actually eats its feces as well because it has to get through round 2 because there's a cow digests its food, multiple times because they chew this stuff up, they regurgitate it up, they're eating that, chewing that. It's called chewing their cud. That's called cud, and that goes back down. They swallow it back down, goes into another part of the stomach, and continues the digestion process on from there. Gorillas don't have that ability. And so
have to prime the system.
They prime the system, and they get that out, and they eat their feces.
Wow.
And they eat their feces. And, and maybe that's why, like chimpanzees and gorillas that throw their feces at people, maybe they're just sharing. They're like, hey, you look like you need some B12. Why don't you take this,
You reckon they can sense it?
And, so it's, they have to do that. And so, I just highly doubt that these people, the gut bacteria in your colon is, whether it makes B12 or not, it's too little too late, right?
Yeah.
So because it's past the point in your gut where you can absorb the B12, so you would have to eat your feces. I don't think that they're doing that too often, and I hope not. And and then getting some dirt on that. That's something that's been asserted but never proven. That's
Right.
something. This is what it is. There's no actual hard evidence for that. And, when people are saying, well, my B12 is fine. Well, okay, how long have you been vegan? How long have you not eaten anything with B12 in it? How long have you not had any B12 shots? Because again, it takes 8-9 years before if you have a good level, it can take 8-9 years before you get down to a point that you're getting serious neurological problems and symptoms, and you're getting anemic and all that sort of stuff. And so you check your B12 and it's so-called normal, but it's anything but, and it's going in the wrong direction as well.
Is it more harsh to the body to have like an exogenous B12, like a shot of B12? That's your water, by the way, if you need it.
Oh, thanks.
If you need if you're deficient in B12, is it better to go and get a shot of B12 or make the adjustment in the diet straight up? Obviously, over time, it's going to be better for the diet because then you're not going to need shots all the time.
Yeah. Well, you might need both, right? And so, if I have a patient and their B12 is under 400, I'm giving them a shot.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and I'm telling them change your diet. But, you need to get that level up because that's actually at a point of actual deficiency where you can cause neurological damage. There's even an interesting study out of Oxford in 2008 where they found they followed a lot of people, and one of the cohorts was a group of vegans, and they just started veganism, and they followed them for 5 years after they'd gone vegan. And they found, and they did MRIs, and they studied their brain and their spinal cord, and they actually found that their brains had shrunk in size by over 5% on average, right? And so they attributed that to the reduction in the B12, right? Because this below 400 can cause demyelination. We actually see this in neurosurgery, which I work in neurosurgery. We actually see this. So like vegans and vegetarians have these like thinned out cords. Spinal cords and things like that. Yeah, the long-term vegans do. Yeah.
Is that because of like lower amounts of omega-6s and omega-3s as well? Because you're not getting as much fish oil and all that stuff as well? The omega-6 to 3 ratio is terrible in plants. It's absolutely wretched. And, the more omega-6s you have, so you need omega-6s, you need omega-3s, you die without either, but you need far less omega-6s than what we're actually getting. And it's the same enzyme that processes both omega-3 and omega-6. And if you have an abundance of omega-6s, you can actually use up all of those enzymes. So even if you have omega-3s and maybe enough omega-3s, it's not getting processed because you run out of that enzyme because it's been used up by all the omega-6s. And maybe you have even more omega-6s that's still drowning things out. And so in meat, it's a much, much, much better omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, much better. And so that's a major problem because the downstream products of omega-6s are extremely pro-inflammatory. That can cause a lot of issues. In fact, the end downstream products of omega-6s are actually what like the COX inhibitors target. So like, ibuprofen, naproxen, gosh, what do you guys call it here? I'm blanking. Nurofen, right? So all those anti-inflammatories, they block the end products of omega-6 production, right? So that's what they do, and you need those molecules to a certain degree, right? But you get an abundance of these things. You can cause increased inflammation, you can cause increased pain. So these inflammatory factors, go into like a nidus, you have like an injury or something like that, or even like a low grade injury, maybe you have like a bit of arthritis in your back or something like that, and that those inflammatory factors go up, they cause more inflammation in that area, and it causes increased pain expression in those areas, and you get more pain. And so then you take these COX-2 inhibitors, and that
blocks those things, and so that reduces that inflammatory response and reduces that pain signal. So that's how that reduces pain, is by reducing that inflammation. But if you didn't have that inflammation in the first place, you wouldn't have the pain.
And
right?
I heard for toleration as well, like over time, if you continued on with those ibuprofens and Nurophens and whatnot, it actually causes more inflammation than it prevents.
Yeah,
have you heard that?
I have, but the thing is too is that I haven't looked too closely into that, but one thing I did hear was because it's an anti-inflammatory, and because it can sort of block out part of our immune system, which is what inflammation is our immune system sort of acting up, that can be normal, right? And so our immune system and our inflammatory system has to do with healing as well. And so there are some suggestions that if you're taking these things long term, you can actually you're taking it for, like, say, arthritis pain, that can actually speed up the degradation of your cartilage and cause worsening arthritis. So it's sort of a patch, and it takes care of you for a while, and it helps with the pain. But because your body's not able to recycle and heal and repair certain things, your tissues are breaking down a bit faster. So that's been a suggestion. I haven't looked too far into that research, but that is something that I've seen.
Would it be correct in saying that the body's response, to let you know that something's wrong, is inflammation, and by reducing the inflammation and not curing what's happening, it's going to let you know in a different way? Like, it would show inflammation, say, if we're talking about arthritis, if you've got bad knees and you're taking these ibuprofens for long enough, and it would start, I don't know, maybe hurting in your ankles now because you haven't fixed your knees, you've just been kind of like, let's push that to the side. Would that be a correct kind of way to say it?
Yeah, well, I mean, even physically, I mean, you can get compensation for, like, if you have arthritis in your knee and you're not dealing with that, and then other joints and things like that overcompensate, and they can get worsening wear and tear as a result of that.
Right.
But, also, if we're focusing on symptom management as opposed to root cause treatment, then the problem's still there, and it's getting worse, and we're just covering it up, right? So, the idea is, if there's smoke, there's fire, right?
Yeah.
But if I blow away the smoke, well, there's no smoke, there's no fire.
Yeah.
Right?
Just embers.
Well, no. You're just blowing smoke away, the fire's still raging, and actually you're blowing on it.
Yeah, it's getting worse.
Yeah, And so that can happen too. And so, that's unfortunately a major problem with modern medicine, is that we're in symptom treatment and management. We're in disease management as opposed to disease prevention, as opposed to cures and fixing things. And I think that's a fundamental problem. And that's why I found it so important, this whole how diet and nutrition relates to chronic disease, because I think that is the root cause. I think that we are animals, and the type of animals we are carnivores. We're biologically designed to eat meat, and animals eat a very specific diet, especially when they're eating plants. They eat specific plants. We are not eating specific plants. We are eating all sorts of plants. And if you could argue that maybe we were eating plants 50,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago, 500,000 years ago, maybe you could argue that. But you can't argue that we're eating any of the plants that we're eating now, because they didn't exist back then.
Yeah.
Right? And so generally what we ate is meat. And in the ice ages, when people were up hunting mammoths, there was no plants.
Yeah.
And so there were no plants. Yeah, that's it. And so there's no plants to eat. A lot of humanity was living as the Inuit do today, or the Nanette do today, which is like up in Siberia, and they just ate meat, right? And so our ancestors did that as well. And some were more towards the equator, and that's great, but not all of them were. When the ice sheets started coming down, people say, "Oh, well, people were just moving towards the equator, and we just never dealt with that." There was always plants available. There are so many things that are just thrown out there without any evidence either being asked for or provided.
Yeah.
And this is one of them. They said, "Oh, well, people just move towards the equator because it sounds good to them. It's the only thing that would make their story make sense," right? But that's exactly the opposite of what we see in the fossil record. As ice sheets were coming down, humans were going into the ice, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where the big game was. That's where the megafauna was. And so we were actually going into it, right? We had fire, we controlled fire, and we were hunting, and we had these prey animals, these big mammoths. That was it that we wanted. We scared them off cliffs. We have evidence of that going back millions of years, where we would do something, spook them, scare them over a cliff, they'd fall and die, and then we'd use stone tools to cut them up, and that would be food for years, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, a mammoth goes a long way.
Oh, yeah. Especially if you get 2 or 3 off them.
Yeah, exactly. You know, so this is something that we've been doing for a very, very long time. And really just eating meat. And so we have been biologically adapted and designed to get this. And again, we need fat and protein and certain nutrients. Well, meat has all of those, and they're perfectly bioavailable. So we get everything that we need from meat in the proportion that we need them. And there are long periods of time where people really didn't have access to plants. And, you know, maybe some people somewhere were eating some plants sometimes, maybe, but, you know, the best evidence shows that there were periods of time that people were living in, you know, ice-locked areas. Yeah. Right. You know, I mean, what were the people that crossed the land bridge from Asia to North America and populated the Americas? I mean, what sort of plants were they eating? You know, during the middle of the ice age, where they could walk across
seaweed,
the
bro.
Bering Sea. Yeah, exactly. And so, you know, it's you know, so there's certainly times and areas where people were exclusively eating meat. And so we know that as Homo sapiens, we can eat that, right? Because we are Homo sapiens sapiens, right? And so if you had a large disparity in the optimal diet between 2 animals, you're talking about 2 different species, right? I challenge anyone to find any example in nature of 2 members of the same species that have different optimal diets.
Yeah.
And now that's not, you know, you know, at the same point in the life cycle, right? Because a tadpole is going to be eating something different than a frog. You know, baby giraffe is going to eat something different than a grown-up giraffe, right? But, you know, in mammals.
But the breakdown of amino acids is still the same requirement.
Pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. And so, but like a mammal is going to drink milk, and then it's going to start drinking what the parents eat. And then it's eating that for the rest of its life. Yeah. Right. All the way across. Cheetahs eat what cheetahs eat. Lions eat what lions eat. Anywhere you go. Right. And that's what's best for them, because that's what they're biologically adapted and designed to eat. We're the same thing. Right. We have been pretty well genetically conserved for about 300,000 years. And so there have been some changes, but not vast changes. Now, some of those changes actually to do with food. People that have had agriculture in the last sort of 8 to 10,000 years have built up a little bit more resistance to these things. But I mean a little bit, because it's not optimal. So Europeans or people from, you know, the Middle East and you know, Samaria, Northern Africa, these are very early places that had agriculture, have a bit more defenses. Right? Native Australians, they have like no defenses, because they didn't have agriculture until the Europeans showed up. Right. And for hundreds of years, they were still just like, yeah, fine, we're fine eating kangaroo, thank you. And as it became more westernized and you know, and more of this stuff they became exposed to more and more of this, they started adopting more of the food and the alcohol and the sugar and things like that we eat, or that the Europeans were eating. So I don't eat it, but no. And they got very sick, you know. So a lot of these testimonials and books and things like that written about, you know, in the 1800s, 1600s, 1700s, that Australian Aborigines or the Native Americans and even sub-Saharan Africans, they were like, you know, these primitive people with like bright white teeth and extremely healthy, lean and strong, like the Maasai are today. Just these big, tall, on average 6'3" dudes, just giants. Yeah, big dudes. And I remember reading an account about the Aborigines in Australia, and there's some sort of conflict in like the 1800s between the British and
there was locals. A little conflict.
Yeah, a few of them at different times, but there was a particular one in Western Australia. And they found, subsequently, they went and looked at the bones of like the dead Aborigines, and they found that like some of their forearm bones,
dense as fuck, right?
But longer than their whole arm, right? Jeez. So there's some big bastards, right?
Yeah, man.
And so, and again, that's not purely genetic. You know, there's epigenetic effects, and so, you know, you're eating the right thing, and you're going to develop to your genetic potential, right? If you're not eating the right thing, you're not going to develop to your potential. And areas that are, undernourished and malnourished and malfed. Places have gone through periods of famine and starvation, like, in across Asia and the communist countries, communist socialist countries like Cambodia and Northern Korea, China, all these places that had very short stature. And then those parents go into Australia or to England or to America. They used to have an abundance of food available. Their kids are 6'4", right? And they're 5 foot something, right? Yeah. And so, the average height of a population denotes the average health of a population.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so, and again, we're Homo sapiens, right? And so we should have a similar genetic potential for height and development and brain capacity. And since the agricultural revolution, not only our jaws have gotten smaller, our brains have gotten smaller. Right. They've reduced by 11% since the advent of agriculture, right? And because our brains are not developing.
Where do you see that going? If advertisement and stuff is getting so compelling now, that McDonald's advert just boosts their revenue 100% over the next year.
Yeah.
What is the meat industry doing? Farmers coming out and saying, look, we need to really look at this? Or is it just too much of a farmer fight, like the grain industry's kind of pushing us back? Or,
Well, the big food industries are multi-trillion-dollar industries, and they are heavily invested in pharmaceutical industries as well, and vice versa. And
have to cut that out. No, I'm kidding.
Well, but but think about that. I mean, that's a conflict of interest right there. I mean, you're investing in something like the food that we eat that can cause these diseases that the pharmaceutical industry is treating, right? And so that's a bit of a conflict of interest right there. And so especially because these people are all the ones making the guidelines and the health and nutrition guidelines as well. And so, and everyone that goes from, the CDC and the FDA and USDA and all these stuff, the heads of all those things all end up working for Pfizer and Merck and all the different sorts of big private companies, because there's I scratch your back, you scratch my back. So, I let your drugs through. I don't look too hard at all this sort of stuff, and we'll let this stuff through, and we'll make these things sort of favorable for you. And when I retire in 15 years, I get this cush board position where I basically, show up for a Zoom meeting once a month, and I get paid, $1 million a year sort of thing. And I get stock options,
That's where the money is.
That's it. Damn. And so, or whatever their deal is, but it's a bit suspicious that, all these people in the public sector that write the guidelines and allow these things to go through are also just getting these big cushy jobs in the private industry as soon as they're out of there. It's a bit concerning. Now, I mean, these people have a lot of experience. They have a lot of experience working with the FDA and the CDC.
They have experience in making money. That's what it is, right?
Yeah.
That's where all of the greed and the want to be the best comes from. Did you see the pyramid, the food pyramid of this year that came out? I think it was January.
No, I don't
it was
think
what the I think it was the World Health Organization, what they recommended for food, and they said a bowl of Captain Crunch cereal is better for you than a bowl of beef mince and 3 eggs. Yeah,
right. I did see that. Yeah, so I saw that. So that was the thing. So people were saying that this is something that that from Tufts University it came out, and some people are saying that that was a utilization of those sorts of things. They're not necessarily saying that this is better than that, and they as people that sort of the apologists for it will say, well, that's not what they're saying, because you can't compare things out of the different. They're saying that these sort of carbohydrates things, of the carbohydrate sort of things, these are better than the other ones, and that of the meats, these are better than the other ones, and all that sort of stuff. But that's actually a bit silly, because they color coordinated these things. So things were like green was just like, these are a go. Green is a go. Eat as much as you want. These are great. These are really good for you. And then yellow was like, eat in moderation. And then red is just like, you shouldn't have this stuff ever. So whether or not that's in the same category or not, one's green, one's yellow, one's red. And so Captain Crunch and Lucky Charms, right? Charms. So so these things with like sugar marshmallows in it, right?
Yeah, literally sugar chunks.
That was in the green group. Eat as much of that as you want. That is perfect nutrition.
Go for it.
Right? And then eggs and ground beef were in the red. right? So
It's kind of like one sector is like a little like to the other sector, you know what I'm saying? Like a little fuck you kind of thing. And then like the meat industry has to fight back against that.
But the thing is that there is no meat industry as there is, per se, you know, because it's disseminated. It's like all these ranchers. I mean, they don't have like a big union. You know, it's not like Nestle. You know, Nestle is a multinational, multi-trillion-dollar institution that owns dozens and dozens of other companies. They are very well in control of things. So with Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, things like that. It's basically those three. They just run the food industry, right? Yeah. Tyson is a major one as well. But Tyson, you know, and all these different food industries, yes, they make money from meat, but they make a lot more money from everything else. And there's a huge markup on plant-based foods and like sugar and things like that. And sugar is addictive. Sugar sends the fructose is the sweet part of sugar and sweetest part of sugar. And that gives a dopamine hit to the addiction centers of your brain, just like cocaine, heroin, and meth. Yeah. And there are MRI studies showing that fructose kills the same areas of your brain as meth to the same extent as meth.
Whoa.
All right. So this is a drug, and they're putting this in. This is the opium trade at the moment, right? So they're just flooding this stuff in, and people are just using it. They don't even realize it, and they're giving it to kids, and they're saying it's good for them, and they're saying these Lucky Charms are okay, and then like even like Honey Nut Cheerios, you know, was ranked above normal Cheerios. I was like, what? It's like the sugar made it better. Yeah. You know?
Come on, man.
Like, what the hell? And like, you know, it's absolutely
meth on
ridiculous.
anything is better, bro.
Probably true.
Fucking hell.
And so, you know, and fructose is degraded and broken down in the same byproducts as alcohol. So it gets turned into the same chemicals as alcohol does.
Acetaldehyde.
Yeah, all that, tons of different junk that it gets turned into. But, right. So it goes down the same pathway.
Oh, shit.
So fructose gets broken down into the exact same byproducts that alcohol gets broken down into. Now they do different things before they get to the liver, but once they're and then broken down, it's exactly the same.
Wow.
And so it causes the same problems, gram for gram, right? So fatty liver disease, cirrhosis, diabetes, heart disease, even implicated in cancer and Alzheimer's, right? So, you know, there's a link between sugar and Alzheimer's, right? So there's a degradation of an adult, mature, healthy brain to the point of severe dementia and death. You know, what's that doing to a developing brain? What's that doing to a fetus? It's not going to be good, right? And so you actually see this large uptick in neurodevelopmental diseases such as autism. Right. And I think that there's a causative link there. I think, yeah, well, there's a hard correlation.
Yeah, but causation.
I think there is. You see this in a number of, first of all, there's a lot of interventions that just put people on a ketogenic diet, and autism reverses or at least improves significantly in adults when they've already developed. But in kids, if you get them young enough, their brain still has a chance to develop more properly. And that's what autism is, in my view, is it's a misdevelopment of these neurons. You're getting neurons that aren't quite developing properly, and they're just not working properly. In some cases, they found that there were like different parts of the brain. They actually had like 3 times the number of neurons that you normally find. Like, oh, wow, well, maybe this is just a different variant, and it's just sort of expressing what it is that those nerves, those brain cells aren't doing the job that the brain needs it to. So it's stimulating more of them to grow. Yeah. Say, hey, no, we need more of this. We need more of this. We need more of this. But they're defunct and they're not working properly.
Right. So they're not transmitting properly.
Exactly. And so, you know, but if you get that early enough, and you sort of get rid of all that crap that's harming them, then they can recover, and those neurons can develop properly. So they're, you know, there's a professor, Chris Palmer from Harvard. He's a professor of psychiatry at Harvard, and he wrote a book called Brain Energy. And I've had him on my podcast. Very interesting guy, but he is reversing schizophrenia, depression, OCD, bipolar, and ADHD and autism by putting people on a ketogenic diet.
Damn.
And he's sort of shown the research behind why he thinks this is working, which is the mitochondria. A lot of things come down to the mitochondria. Cancer comes down to the mitochondria. Most things come down to the mitochondria and disruption of their normal functioning. They don't just produce ATP. So if people don't know, mitochondria are organelles in your cell that produce ATP, which is the energy for life. That's what all life runs on.
Adrenal triphosphate?
Adenosine triphosphate.
Triphosphate.
Yeah. And so, you know, that is what cells run on. That's the currency of life.
Yeah.
right? But they don't just sit there just pumping out ATP. They actually move around the cell. There's these different little structure and lattice inside the cell, and they actually run up and down these tracks, and they go to this part of the cell membrane and they release ATP. So this releases this neurotransmitter at this time, at this exact location, and this amount, right? And they go over here and they release it to this organelle, so they can make this protein, they can do this, and then go to this and go to this, and you've got thousands of these little things buzzing around producing ATP. Now, if those things are just a little late and they're not producing quite enough, then you're going to get the wrong signal. It's going to be delayed.
Shit.
Or it's, sometimes things are sort of suppressive, so it's not getting there, and now you're getting too much of a signal.
Yeah.
Right. So you're getting too much of a signal or not enough signal, but either way, you're out of balance. And so when that's happening in your brain, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Especially because you have anywhere from 400 million to 2 trillion neurons, right? And you got hundreds to thousands of these mitochondria in each one of those things. That problem starts to escalate quite severely.
Yeah.
And so when you start damaging these mitochondria, you get serious problems. When your insulin is up, this blocks autophagy, this blocks mitophagy. So autophagy is, or autophagy. Phagy meaning is to eat, right? So it's this autophagy, so your body's eating these cells, recycling them, turning them into new cells, new bright-eyed, bushy-tailed cells that work better. But you can also do that with your specific organelles within the cell. So the cell can actually recycle its internal parts and keep itself running and optimized, right? Like your mitochondria. So your mitochondria start running get a little bit decrepit, a little bit broken down, all of this oxidative stress. And so they need to break those down, recycle them for parts, make new ones. And what we found in various studies is that when you go on a ketogenic diet, within a few months, you will increase the number of mitochondria you have by a factor of 4.
Wow.
And they increase their efficacy by a factor of 4.
Whoa.
So you get this multiplicative increase, and also you're getting the right response at the right time. And that's very important when you're talking about neurons. And so he found that this was really to do with that these psychiatric diseases were actually metabolic diseases. And so you fix the metabolism, you fix the mitochondria with diet and other sorts of interventions, that this can cure schizophrenia, OCD, bipolar, major depression, anxiety, ADHD, and autism, if you catch it in time. Adults with autism can be significantly improved in their symptoms and the functioning of their brain and body. But in kids, it's even more dramatic. You can actually reverse the damage. There's a number of different studies that I found when I first got curious about this, and I remember looking into it and thinking, wait a minute, when I started thinking about medicine from the standpoint of we're humans, and the kind of human we are is a carnivore, and animals have a specific biologically appropriate and designed diet, and we're not eating that. And then just everything in medicine just started slotting into place. I just started digging into the research and seeing, okay, what do we know? What can we prove? And I was spending about 10 hours a day for, 6 months, just reading studies. And so I found quite a lot, and I started asking questions, and I started saying, okay, if this is true, we should see something in the literature, that expresses this. Okay, let's start looking for that. And I would just start looking at these things, asking questions and looking for what because if you have two competing theories, you should be able to find evidence with which to test them against. And so that's what I tried to do. And then I came to sort of the idea that maybe autism was to do with nutrition, and maybe it was tied up in sugar, or maybe it was to do with not eating enough meat. And so I said, okay, well, if that's the case, we should be able to see something in it. Well, so how can we see about, sugar? Are there any studies about specifically, does sugar cause autism? Can't really find anything. So you have to ask in a sort of a circuitous way. And so I thought, okay, is there a higher rate of autism in kids that are bottle fed with formula, right? Because formula has they take away, fat's bad. We can't give that to kids, even though it's in breast milk.
Yeah.
That's like literally exactly what they need.
Such a stupid argument.
So dumb.
Yeah.
And so they replace it with sugar. They know what they're doing. The stuff is addictive. Yeah. And they're getting these kids addictive, and they overeat. And but also they just eat more formula. Yeah, true. Right? Because I just want more. And it's addictive.
Moreish.
Yeah. And so that exact study has been done. And so they have found that kids that are bottle fed are more likely to get autism. And that study didn't specifically look at formula. It was just bottle fed versus breastfed.
Right.
But a lot of people who do bottle feed use formula, at least in part. And so now people can express and then put that in the bottles.
You would imagine it would be like that because they can only synthesize so many chemicals, or even nutrients, right? There's only so many nutrients that you can synthesize before it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense as to why they would even make that distinction between just bottle and breast. It should be formula and breast.
Oh, it should be. Yeah. But the good thing about that is that most people who bottle feed aren't expressing and then giving a bottle.
Yeah.
Some people do, but most people will give formula or at least some formula. But people who exclusively breastfeed, they're exclusively breastfeeding.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, but even then, and I think the disparity, the difference would be even more stark if you are like formula versus exclusive breastfeeding or breast milk feeding. I think that would show that the difference is actually even worse.
A lot more binary. You could just say we have like this and this. Yeah.
But there's already a difference with bottle fed and breastfed.
Right.
There's already an increased correlation or increased incidence of autism in kids that are bottle fed. Right. Mothers who eat more red meat in the 3 months before conception, lower rates of kids with autism.
What?
Mothers who have higher LDL cholesterol and higher saturated fat intake during pregnancy, lower rates of kids with autism.
What?
Right? So this is getting the necessary nutrients to grow and develop their brain properly.
Dude, that's wild.
Yeah. There's an even more wild one. There's a study out of Texas A&M that found an actual causative link between food and autism, or at least a particular kind of autism, right? Autism spectrum disorder. It's a spectrum of symptoms. I think that means that there's a spectrum of causes and different sorts of parts of the brain that this is affecting to different levels and degrees. And they found, and so that was the thing I was asking that. I was like, okay, does the absence of meat, do you need meat in order to get, a proper brain development? I would say so. And that was the thing I asked. I was like, is autism to do with nutrition? And so I thought about it, and so I looked back and I looked at the prevalence and incidence and the increase in autism, and when that started going up, it was at the exact same time as the heart disease, obesity, and diabetes and cancer rates all started going up, and it perfectly tracked up with all the rest of the diseases. So I was like, okay, this could very well be someone with a genetic predisposition and environmental trigger, but because we were eating a lot of meat before, they're not getting that environmental trigger. So the genetics are the same. It's becoming more apparent now because people are radically changing the way they're eating.
Yeah.
And so I thought, okay, is less meat a risk factor for autism? Okay, we'll look into that. If that's the case, vegans and vegetarians should have higher rates of kids with autism.
Yes.
And in fact, they do. And so their kids have a much higher rate of autism.
By what kind of factor?
I don't recall it at this point,
Okay.
but yeah, but it is higher.
Oh, I'm definitely looking into this.
Yeah.
And
And Texas A&M actually found one of the reasons why.
yeah.
So they found that you actually have to have carnitine for proper neuronal development. And in fact, talking to Chris Palmer, he was saying, yeah, actually carnitine is integral for mitochondrial health in the brain as well.
That's a medium chain triglyceride as well, isn't it?
It's an amino acid.
It's an amino. Yeah, of course it is.
Yeah, and so it's considered a non-essential amino acid,
right?
Because we make it.
Okay, right.
Carnitine, carnosine, carnivore, carne, Latin for body, right?
Yeah.
So this comes from bodies. It doesn't come from plants.
I remember taking carnitine before going to the gym and just feeling like an animal.
Yeah. Well, even taking carnitine, that actually increases the testosterone receptors in your cells. So whatever testosterone levels you have, if you have more carnitine, you'll have more receptors. You'll have more of an effect from your testosterone. So yeah, you will do that, and it will have long-term effects, right? So these things kick off epigenetic sort of effects that affect you weeks and months and years down the chain.
There you go.
And so yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay. And so specifically in autism, they found that carnitine was essential for neuronal development and just the normal workings in your body. Now we consider that a non-essential amino acid because we make it, but actually only 70% of people make enough or even any at all. Some people don't make enough, and some people don't make any. And so literally 30%, that's a big number.
That's huge.
Right? And so depending on what you're eating, you could be in trouble because carnitine does not exist in plants, right? You have to get it from meat. It exists in most animal products, most dairy, but it is most abundant in red meat.
Red meat.
What's the first thing that vegetarians drop?
Red meat.
Red meat, right?
Yeah.
Because that's the worst.
Fish and chicken.
That's it.
Yeah.
Well, again, it's the best.
Yeah.
Right. And this is another reason why, yes, we make carnitine, but actually having more carnitine is actually beneficial in a lot of ways. And, I mean, we make, other things that we have and it makes it's non-essential, but we actually do better when we have more of it, and we get a lot of it from meat and things like that. So vegans and vegetarians are becoming more prevalent, and the rates of autism is becoming more apparent. And one of the reasons is because of this lack of carnitine. So this is not going to affect everyone. You have to have the genetic predisposition and the environmental trigger. So previously, when everyone knew that meat was really important to get, this is where the nutrients were, you had to have this in your diet, they went after meat and they tried to get meat. And so you didn't really see this as much in the population. So it was quite low. But now that people are purposefully avoiding meat, it's starting to become more prevalent. And so if you have a kid that has this issue and they're not making enough carnitine, let's say they're vegetarian and they're getting a bit of carnitine in some chicken or fish or maybe some eggs or dairy, but they're not eating too much of that, and and they're mostly eating vegetables, and they don't make any carnitine at all, they're going to be deficient, and they're going to develop this form of autism. Then the vegans, they don't eat any animal products at all. So even if they're slightly deficient in their ability to make carnitine, because they're not getting anything in their diet, they'll still get this type of autism. And this is completely preventable and reversible. Hey everyone, really happy to announce a new sponsor for the show and for everybody down in Australia, Stockman Steaks, who are delivering high quality grass-fed and finished pasture-raised beef and other meats, flash frozen and vacuum sealed to your door, something that I've been enjoying a lot of myself recently as well. They also have a great range of specialty items such as high-fat keto mince and carnivore beef and organs mince with liver, kidneys, and beef heart as well. So use code Chaffee today for a free order of beef mince or another specialty gift along with your order at stockmansteaks.com.au, and I'll see you over there. Thanks, guys.
It's also ethically wrong,
I think so.
right?
Absolutely.
If you're a human, your urge to have children is there. Obviously, you want to procreate. Do you want to give your children like the worst rate of advantage at all? Like, what is going on there?
Yeah, I think it's completely unethical and immoral to do that to your child. You want to ruin your own life. That's your business, but you don't get to do that to another life that's under your care. I think that's parent neglect, and I think that's criminal neglect. And in fact, there are people even in this world of vegan so wonderful and plant-based, this, that, and the other. There are people that are getting their kids taken away from them because they're vegan. And they're pushing that on their kids, and their kids are getting so malnourished that it's actually damaging them and is dangerous. Kids have died. And the parents have been prosecuted for murder.
Good.
Yeah. Because they have been, giving them a fruitarian sort of thing. But that's the problem, is that they really believe this. And they've been sucked in by these vegan gurus who
It didn't work for Steve Jobs. It's not going to work for you.
Well, there's that. Yeah, exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and there's even mothers that are vegan whose kids are dying from their breast milk.
What?
Yeah, because their breast milk is so deficient in nutrients and potentially passing on, harmful level of oxalates and other toxins or lectins and whatever that the kids cannot.
To the calcium.
It can bind to the calcium, but it does a lot of other things too. And oxalate. You can die from oxalate poisoning.
Jeez.
It can cause an acute cardiac arrest. And so I think it's over people that have had over, I think 4,000 milligrams of oxalate in one go have died, right? Almost certainly in the context of someone eating, more than they should going on. And then they had this sort of build up. And then all of a sudden, the hammer came down and they got very sick and they died. And, there's a ton in the published case studies There are a ton of those examples, and Sally Norton goes through several of them in her book, talking about, in this case, this happened. There was diagnosed. This was acute oxalate poisoning, from eating this whatever that had 4,000 milligrams of oxalates in it and things like that.
Wow.
You don't absorb all of it. It's like 10% maybe you absorb, but you eat 4,000 and you're absorbing 400. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about how much you're eating, not how much you're absorbing.
Yeah.
So, spinach is going to have like 600 milligrams of oxalates, but absorbing 60, that's what's causing the problem. So you don't want to eat more than 150, 200 a day, right? But you're only going to absorb like 10% or none at all.
Yeah.
And where I'm coming from, yeah. And to hop back to when you first talking about hormesis, again, this is just the cop out of the day.
Yeah.
From the vegan community is that it started with like, plants don't have defense chemicals. That's just crazy. We're in the Garden of Eden, didn't you know? Haven't you read the Bible, right? So, people think that. They actually think that plants are 100% safe. And it's like, okay, well, then why do you go to the grocery store? Why do you buy lettuce? Why don't you just go to the park?
Yeah,
get a bunch of random ass leaves, And so,
Well said.
it's just like it's a silly thing to say, and to deny. This is a well-known phenomenon that plants use toxins to defend themselves, right? And so, they tried arguing that for a while, but I mean, the evidence is just frankly there. And so eventually they actually read a book and went, oh crap. All right. Yep. All right. They're here. All right. So what's our cop out now? It's, oh, well, I bet you they're good for you. It's like, hold on a second. So these are designed in order to kill and deter animals and insects. That is their purpose. And yet you're saying that they're good for you. Why would they be good for you? Are we biologically designed to eat them? Are we biologically adapted to, get maximal nutrition and benefit from these things that did not exist 50 years ago? Some of these things didn't exist last year. And we're saying that
kale.
Exactly. I mean, this is all made up. Yeah. Broccoli, that's
comes from the mustard plant, right? It's all like the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, a lot of those things are. And so, they just breed these things and go in different directions, Swiss chard, all these tons of oxalates in Swiss chard. And so,
you would never guess it, right?
Yeah.
Because they all just look so healthy.
Yeah. And they taste so good.
Yeah.
It's not that they're bitter and disgusting as hell, and that should tell you something. That bitter taste is your tongue and your brain, which are sophisticated machines, telling you a warning saying, hey, there's something bad here. Don't eat this. Your natural instinct when you put something bitter in your mouth is to spit it out.
Yeah.
Right? That's a survival mechanism. And so when you give kids those broccoli and the spinach and things like that,
and
they just go
spitting it out.
They're disgusted and horrified by it, because they're closer to their genetics than we are, and so they haven't been inundated and pressured and brainwashed into thinking, oh, that horrible taste, that's good for you. You have to eat it. You have to eat it. It's good for you. It's good for you. It's good for you. And now they're like, and now it's like Stockholm syndrome, right? They're like, oh no, I like it. And it's like, no, you don't. Stop it.
Yeah.
And
I used to always spit out my onions and capsicums.
Yeah.
I hated them. Like when
capsicums are nightshades. Those are even worse. Yeah.
They're the worst things you can eat.
Yeah. Or very bad anyway, of the so-called edible plants, right?
Yeah.
But they can kill you. Solanine can kill you in a high enough levels, and especially things that are still green. Those seeds aren't ready. They do not want you to eat that. That's where their highest levels of defense chemicals are in there. This is why traditionally they say that green tomatoes are poisonous, right? And that's because those seeds are not ready, and that's where the highest levels of solanine and other toxins are in there, because the tomatoes and nightshade as well.
Interesting.
And so,
have you heard of the mild model virus?
The mild model virus?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
It's a type of virus that grows on nightshades like capsicums and bell peppers, same thing, and jalapenos and stuff. And it only grows on agricultural grown, like in fields, like one crop, single crop agriculture. And apparently it gets into your microbiome and it acts like an anti-nutrient.
Ah, okay.
And it just stops the absorption of, like, I think a lot of amino acids and stuff, which is very strange.
Yeah, interesting.
I'll
check it out. Yeah. But so I mean, then these people go and they say, well, I bet you it's good for you. Well, based on what? Well, based on the fact that we have these epidemiological studies that say if you eat more fruits and vegetables, it's better for you. Like, well, that doesn't actually, first of all, that doesn't say that that's better because of hormesis.
Yeah.
That just says it's better than what you're comparing it against. But what you're comparing it against is the standard bullshit diet, right? Because that's where these things are done. There's like, this is the standard diet. You're just eating the normal processed food diet, 70% processed food, or still plant-based, and most of that's processed food. And, you know, kids are like literally eating like 70-80% of their calories come from processed food, which is nuts. And adults, you know, in America and Australia and the West, you know, 30-40% of their diet is processed food. Yeah, it is.
That's a lot of fucking sawdust.
Yeah. And so, you know, they're saying that it's just like, okay, so that's what you're comparing it to, right? Because you're comparing it against the norm. You're comparing it against the society. So when you have this intervention, you say, okay, well, what about these people that are eating less of that? You're comparing it to a processed food diet, right? Okay, yeah, no one's arguing that. No one's saying that that's not better. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about a processed food diet. I agree, processed food diet is terrible. What we're comparing here and what we're talking about is a whole food meat-based diet with a whole food plant-based diet. Your best vegan vegetarian diet versus just a steak, right? And that they have not done. And so all of their studies, these big epidemiological studies, they're extremely flawed. And that's a whole other rabbit hole, but the whole field of dietetics and nutritional sciences was founded by the Seventh-day Adventist Church in 1917. This is a fact. This is a historical record people can look into. The first textbook on nutrition and dietetics was written by the Seventh-day Adventists, I think 1925. Sally Norton actually talks about this. So she has a degree and a master's in nutrition from Cornell University, Ivy League university in America, right? Yeah. And she's been a professional researcher and an academic for decades. Right. And she was plant-based the whole time. She's like, oh my God, plant-based, so great, so great, so great. And she basically killed herself with oxalate poisoning. She was in a wheelchair, you know, she was like in her 30s, you know what I mean? And she was so sick. And so, you know, she, you know, was on a crusade about this because it literally ruined her life. And she's seen it ruin so many other people's lives. And so she's written that book. But she is, and people say, oh, you can't talk about this because you don't have a degree in nutrition. I'm like, thank God I don't have a degree in nutrition. Yeah. Nutritional sciences have been founded and indoctrinated by the Seventh-day Adventist Church since its founding, because they founded it. And they are still heavily involved in nutritional sciences and teaching throughout the world. The Seventh-day Adventist Church is religiously anti-meat because they think that meat causes lustful feelings. People who eat meat want to have sex more, want to masturbate more. What? Because they're healthier and they have better hormones. Yeah. Right? But in the 1800s, they were just like, well, lust is a sin. Therefore, meat is sinful. Sake. And they had this prophetess who, it's just funny to think of that as a prophetess. She had a dream, and in that dream, God told her that we should not be eating meat. Meat is sinful for that reason. And her protege was a guy named Harvey Kellogg, who grew up to be Dr. Kellogg of Kellogg's cereals. And he was a very influential scientist in America, very influential. I think he was even a congressman at one point. And he actually teamed up with Edward Bernays. Oh, did he? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you know who that is? Father of propaganda.
Yeah. Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. He started the breakfast revolution.
Yeah. And it was for that reason. It was to try. It was
Kellogg's.
Yeah. Kellogg's cereals. So Kellogg's cereal, Kellogg cornflakes, was first designed to meet that end, to try to basically castrate, chemically castrate them and suppress their natural urges to procreate, because he just thought it was just so sinful. And I think he bragged that he was married for decades. He's like never banged his wife. He was just like, oh, that's great. It was just like, I bet you she wasn't sticking to that story.
Oh, hell no. She's competent from all the meat eaters.
Hopefully she wasn't anyway.
Yeah.
And that was the thing. This guy had big hang-ups on sex. He was the one who pushed through the recommendation that boys should be circumcised because this was better for their health at some reason. No, it was to make it more difficult for them to have sex and to masturbate. And then people figured out lube, and that was the end of that. But the idea was still there. People were still circumcising their kids. Yeah. Even though it didn't meet the end that he wanted it to. But that was what that came from. And he tried to push through these dietary measures as well. Tried to put breakfast is the most important meal of the day. And it was to try to get people to eat more of this crap in order to suppress their natural hormones and urges.
Do you know what's wild? If you actually just think about this, right? Like cornflakes is a guy trying to push celibacy on me.
Yeah. It's funny, and it's a guy who was a bit of an inventor and thought that enemas were great. And some enemas can be good for certain reasons, like coffee enemas actually seem to be beneficial in some different.
Not when you have Crohn's. Don't do that.
No, don't do that.
I've done that. It's not fun. It's not fun.
And so he had this machine that he just. It's so gross. He designed this machine that you basically stick this enema tube up your rectum, and it would pump in like 60. It was something. What was it? It was something like 20 gallons of water in and out over the course of 60 seconds. So just like shooting it in and it was like shooting it in, taking it out, shooting it in, taking it out. And he was reported to do this every day for his health and not for his suppressed sexual urges or anything like that, I'm sure. And
that dude was coming all over the floor. Let's be honest. That's the first ever dildo machine that goes.
Oh my god!
That's what that is.
Funny side note: when I was probably like 12 or 13, my parents had a big library in the house, and there was a big encyclopedia. It was a medical encyclopedia of medical instruments and tools and things like that. Big bastard. And it was all these historical ones. I was just sort of flipping through it because I'd always wanted to be a doctor, and so everything medical was just sort of interest me. So I'd open it up and sort of flipping through it. I wasn't actually looking for anything particular, but then all of a sudden something caught my eye. It sort of looked like these, sort of like those back massagers, like the big head and it's like just a normal stick, and you just sort of reach behind you, and it had that sort of angled head. You could sort of reach back and get your back. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. What's this about? So I read the article, and it was on the first vibrators, like the vibrating sort of massage things. And what is for, swear to God, true story, people didn't look this up, was people used to think that hysteria, women would get hysterical, right? What is hysterical and hysterectomy, right? Why do those have the same roots, right? So they thought that hysteria was like a chemical or hormonal imbalance from the uterus. What? They thought the uterus was just pumping out a whole bunch of crazy woman hormones, and so they needed to somehow stimulate the uterus and make it calm down.
So this made them calm. Yeah.
And so they would by digital manipulation, they would
by
rub
digital,
the woman.
Are you talking digits?
Yep.
Really?
Yep. Yeah. So like a digital rectal examination. That's finger up the bum. And so this is actually what they were doing. I don't know for sure, but I just have a feeling this may be where like the term Dr. Feelgood comes from.
Shit.
And so so they just go in there, and I remember reading this and it said that,
honey, I'm feeling moody. I'm going to the doctor.
Or just be exactly. Just be, I guess it's bullshit. It's like, you need to go to a doctor. Just sort yourself out.
No worries.
It's just like, yep, I'll be back. They're already out the door. And
why'd you take the lube?
And this is like 80 years before like people like generally recognized that female orgasm was a thing.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. And so
true.
it's just hysteria. And so these women are not getting their needs met, and they're just like, this is bullshit.
Yeah.
And it's just like you need to go see the doctor or whatever.
That's why women love doctors.
just like
I see what you're doing.
Just like a hereditary thing. It's just like passed down. It's like, no, these are the good ones, guys.
These are the good men. Yeah. They'll look after you.
Yeah. And so in the article, they said that the doctors might take like an hour or more to like get a result and to cure the hysteria.
Whoa.
And the nurses were saying, is it behind closed doors? I mean, this was before like they had chaperones and things like that. She's like, I'll be back, cancel my appointments, and they were saying, and the nurse was saying, it was just like, well, no, nurses should be doing this procedure because we're women, we know the body a bit better. We can get a result in a few minutes, whereas like the male doctors, it takes longer. And the doctors did refuse. That was like they were just like, no, absolutely not. This is my job. This is a doctor's job. Yeah. You're not qualified for this. And so
I'm on their team.
And so one
all the women trying to take men's jobs all the time.
And I think this is one that was fought for.
I bet. And we're making a stand on this one.
and under certain conditions, something's just like, you know what, you take this one.
Yeah. I bet you would.
So one enterprising doctor just says, you know what, this is just taking a long time. We need to do this faster. And so they invented the vibrator.
Yeah.
And it was for that reason. So it wasn't a back massager.
Wow.
It was a lady massager. And so that was the first vibrator was to, give these women an orgasm to fix their hysteria. And what a time to be alive.
Yeah. Fix your hysteria at home.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah. And, so I saw that and I was just like, well, I was like, no way. And it always stuck with me. Yeah. And so when I was in medical school, I remember that sort of came up and I was like, well, actually, like, this is what it is. Bullshit. That can't be true. And I was just like, look it up. It's actually like a Wikipedia article on it too.
Really?
Like, they're talking about it. And they're like, holy shit, this is real. I was like, I'm telling you.
I studied this shit.
Yeah. Man. And it was so funny though. Yeah, I mean, a bit of a distraction, but it's just funny, what we've done historically as people is try to fix different problems that all of a sudden are just like, yeah, that wasn't the problem we thought it was.
No. I think there's probably, and looking into the future, I feel like with like take CRISPR and stuff, we're going to find out things that we had no idea and things that are going to seem like so elementary. Like they probably seem so fucking advanced right now, but they're going to seem so elementary in say 10 to 15 years. We're going to be like, oh no, we were just like targeting this little niche, but it was a completely different web of like, science that we would think of.
Yeah. And there's a lot of that, there's a lot of that comes. And I think we will, and I think that hopefully most people get on this understanding that we knew for thousands of years that you need to eat meat. That's what we're designed to eat. That's where you get nutrition from. And, and the idea, I mean, since I was a kid, we were taught that humans are apex predators, top of the food chain. We hunted, maybe hunter-gatherers, but really hunted. And apex predators don't graze, right? Top of the food chain, they eat animals. They, great white sharks aren't eating kelp for roughage, right? Lions don't eat grass, right? Apex predators eat animals. They eat meat. And that's what we were doing. That's what we've been doing for millions of years. Maybe we eat some plants here and there. Certainly would use them medicinally when we needed to. But generally we ate meat unless we were in a position that we couldn't get meat. And then we had to eat something else. And it's good that we were able to do that. That's a survival mechanism, right? We were able to survive. It's not like, cats and wolves and things like that, felines like lions, like they really can't eat any plants. They will die. Yeah. And the people are this movement, like, vegan cat movement, like, you out of your mind. And so, and same with
they like it, man.
Oh, dude. And I mean, they just have no respect for life is really what it is.
It's the most unethical thing that you can do is force an animal to like regulate to a different diet when it's for a fact that once you open that little can of tuna they go fucking mental. They go mental. But
it's probably hormetic. Probably them dying is hormetic. Right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing too. We're talking about lectins in beans. Like if you don't cook and prepare beans properly, like we have to cook these things in very specific ways because the lectins can kill you.
That's why sprouting has become a thing now.
Yeah, yeah, it can be, and that's like when you ripen a fruit, it decreases the amount of toxins in it. So you have an avocado, and it's tree ripened, it'll have about 50 milligrams of oxalates in it. If you pick that thing green, it has over 200, right? And then all the other defense chemicals in there are similarly raised, right? Solanine in tomatoes. Same thing, right? If there's green, way more solanine and toxins in there. If it's vine ripened, then there's a lot less. There's more in the skin because that's barrier protection. So you take the skin off. That's what people used to do. They used to blanch it, take the skin off, take the seeds out because the seeds are the plant's babies. That's where it has a lot of toxins in it. So they just ate the pulp, but only when it was vine ripened. Now we're picking all this stuff green
and ripening it off the
vine. And there are studies showing that they don't detoxify if you do that.
Wow.
And we're not taking the skins off. We're not taking the seeds out, right? So we're adding a lot more toxins to our body that we didn't used to do. And so one of the things that we would do is we cook beans, soak them in water for a number of hours, boil them. That's an intensive process. You have to do a lot of crap to do that.
Yeah.
And you can't just do that naturally, right? You can't just like look at it and flame it with your eyes. No, you need to like use chemical means to boil that, to cook that. You don't need to cook meat. You can eat raw meat. It's totally fine. Steak tartare, and sashimi, things like that. I eat a lot of raw meat or just very rare meat. And but we can eat raw meat. We have the biological ability to eat raw meat. We don't necessarily have the biological ability to eat a lot of raw plants. And, sometimes we have to cook them, prepare them, or do something chemically to them, like corn. Normally they would do something called nixtamalization, which they would like soak it in lye for like 24 hours and do a whole bunch of other things that would chemically extract some of the nutrients, get some of the niacin. Like we're talking about with fiber, that's glucose that's bound up in a way that we can't access because the plant does not want us to benefit from eating its body, right? It does that with a lot of other nutrients as well. And so they're not bioavailable. So it may have a lot of iron, it may have a lot of vitamins, but they're not bioavailable. And that's one thing with niacin. Corn has a ton of niacin, but it's not available to us.
Yeah.
And that's why in Mesoamerica, they would go put the corn through this process of nixtamalization.
What does that consist of?
I think it's lye. I think they soak it in lye, which is a base, right? So it's like sodium hydroxide, I believe.
Yeah.
And so
terrible for you.
It's bad. But they soak this in the corn in that and then wash it off and things like that. And that seems to break those bonds with the niacin because it's bound up in a way that the plant can use it, but we can't use it.
Yeah.
Right? Because we don't have the biological ability to do it because we're not evolved to do it. Right? So if you have to put something through a chemical process to extract the nutrients and detoxify it, then, we're not designed to eat it,
we probably
right?
shouldn't be eating it.
Well, yeah, but we're certainly not designed to eat it.
Yeah.
So the argument, oh, no, we're designed to eat this, then why do we have to put something through a chemical process?
Yeah.
Obviously, we can't. We don't. And so there's actually a thing called pellagra, which is niacin deficiency, which actually killed millions of people, and we didn't know why. And they figured out it was to do with corn because it was a very cheap thing to produce, and so a lot of the poor people were eating just a buttload of corn, and they were dying of niacin deficiency, and they thought it was like an infection or something like that. But the guy who they commissioned to say, hey, find out what infection this is, he's like, I don't think it's an infection. I think this is something to do with corn. I don't know what it is. And he figured out that it was a vitamin deficiency. Right. And the irony is that corn has a ton of niacin.
Yeah.
It's just not bioavailable.
Also known as vitamin B3, right? Niacin.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, doesn't that sound way more healthy?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Packed full of vitamin B3.
Yeah. And so, so the idea, that we're designed to eat this stuff is insane to me.
Yeah.
We're saying we're apex predators, top of the food chain. That was never argued. But people say, well, you don't want to eat fat, you don't want to eat meat. Okay, well, fine. We've discounted that too. That's been completely debunked that cholesterol does not cause heart disease. Saturated fat does not cause heart disease. It's actually really, really important for you as it's an essential nutrient. We need this. We need to eat these things.
Yeah.
We don't get them from plants. And and then they were saying, well, ethically, we don't really like hurting animals and all that sort of stuff. Hey, look, fine. I don't like the thought of that either. But when you're only growing crops, you actually have to kill far more animals to grow those crops because you're destroying an entire ecosystem. You're plowing these fields and everything like that where animals live in, and they're getting churned up and chopped up and everything like that. The kangaroos and deer and pigs and things like that come in to eat your crops, they have to shoot them, right? They're pests. They have to sort of kill those things. You're dumping a bunch of chemicals and fertilizers that washes off in the rain, gets into the water supply, and chokes off and kills tons of fish and everything like that. So there's actually a huge ecological disaster growing crops, right? But that's one of the drivers. They say, well, we don't want to hurt these animals. And that was the argument for decades. Hey, you shouldn't eat that. The PETA argument was that, hey, you shouldn't do this. It's not morally correct to do this, right? And they do a lot of pretty immoral sort of things in their to push their message. But, that's an aside. But no one ever had the temerity to argue that, no, actually humans are herbivores. We're actually just walking cows, like two-legged cows and things like that. It's just like no one ever made that claim because that is strictly against the evidence. But now they're starting to make that argument, and that's where it ties in with hormesis. Oh, actually, you need this stuff. It gives this hormetic effect. It's like, okay, no. And first of all, there's a difference between hormesis, where like exercise, where you push yourself and you sort of maybe damage your body a bit, but then you give your body a chance to recover, and it does, and you get stronger as a result of that.
They call that cycling, right?
Yeah. And the thing is that when but there's a difference between that and tolerance, right? So you have a tolerance to alcohol, you drink alcohol, you build up a tolerance, right? And so when you drink alcohol after that, well, you've built up a defense towards it. That's a hormetic effect, right? Your body's built up stronger. No, it's built up stronger against alcohol.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's not really helping you necessarily in other ways, and it's harming you in other ways. So that's like, okay, well, you can do a bench press, and that's great. And there you're getting stronger. Well, you're getting stronger As far as a bench press is concerned, great. Okay, that makes you stronger in other ways too. Maybe it has other benefits.
Cardiovascular benefits and stuff.
But if you do too much, you blow out your shoulder. Well, that's a net negative.
Yeah.
Right. But with tolerance, I mean, there's nothing hormetic about that. You're just building up a tolerance against alcohol, and there's no real other benefits in your body, and there's a lot of damage being caused to your body. After years and decades, we get all sorts of very serious illnesses from long-term alcohol abuse. Right? That's hormetic now? So
good point.
And so the hormesis is they build up a resistance to alcohol. Okay, well, that's only beneficial if you're going to keep drinking alcohol. But and even then, you're not negating the harmful effects of alcohol. You're just sort of reducing them a bit, right? And so that's not really the same thing. And when they say this, oh well, yeah, I bet you it's hormetic. It's like, okay, well again, there are like 1 million different toxins in these things, in beans, just kidney beans. WHO actually says, and they're like crazy pro plant, but there's different people that work at the WHO, and some of them are actually real scientists. And there's a whole webpage on the WHO's website going through all the different natural defense chemicals and toxins in foods that we eat on a daily basis, and talking about if you don't prepare these things properly, if you don't eat them in the proper proportion, you can die. And they are they can be carcinogenic, they can be mutagenic, they can be directly toxic and cause malnutrition, they can cause serious health adverse effects and even death in humans and livestock. That is on their website. And they talk about...
The only issue is the next page over will be like, yeah, but eat all this.
Well, and then at the bottom they just say, most people just eating a balanced diet, it's not that hard. But okay, but what the hell is a balanced diet, right? So, and they even say, as little as 5 kidney beans that are not prepared properly can put you in the hospital, and have put people in the hospital. Kidney beans. Kidney beans are a normal thing that normal people eat.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I've got a can in the pantry.
And most people would think of that as healthy. Oh yeah, kidney beans. Oh, legumes. Oh, they're so good for you. No, they're not. They're really not. And you'll know about that if you don't prepare them properly and soak them and boil them and cook them in certain ways. And so these people have gone to the hospital because of that. Okay, so that's a hormetic hospitalization, right? I mean, like what is hormetic about that? You're getting so sick that you have to go to the hospital, right? And there are people that like cassava root, right? Yeah. So you go to the tropics. People go to Indonesia, you'll see like or Southeast Asia, you'll see those bags of chips, like cassava chips, right? So cassava root is the number 3 calorie source for all the tropics.
Okay.
And it's the number 1 calorie source for 500 million people in the world.
Whoa.
Right? There are 2 kinds of cassava, bitter cassava, sweet cassava. They both have cyanide. Bitter cassava has so much cyanide that it's very bitter, and it can kill you with the amount of cyanide that it has.
Whoa.
Right? And so it has to be specially prepared. And if it's not prepared properly, you can die from the amount of cyanide that's in there.
Shit.
But even low-grade cyanide exposure is not hormetic. It causes thyroid dysfunction and neurological impairment. Right? And especially in people, it seems to be mostly in people that are protein deficient. They're not getting enough protein, but like, who are we talking about? We're talking about people in the tropics.
They're not eating that many animals.
Well, and they're a lot of them are impoverished.
Yeah.
And the reason that they're eating cassava, and especially maybe getting cassava as their main nutrient source, is because they're quite impoverished.
Yeah.
And so most people around the world are eating less than the minimum recommendation, WHO recommendation, right? And we look at that recommendation as like, oh, well, that's something to shoot for. I'm getting around there. No, that's a bare minimum. Jesus. And you're shooting for that. It's like, no, this isn't a speed limit on the highway. It's not like don't go here this high, but don't go further. It's just like, no, you are not allowed. You should not go below this. And most people are looking at this as a target as opposed to a bare minimum.
Wow.
And so a lot of these people are going to be in that situation. They are going to be protein deficient. They are going to be nutritionally deprived. They are going to be metabolically unwell, and they have this stuff in their bodies less able to take care of. This is the same with oxalates as well. The more metabolically unwell you are, the harsher oxalates are going to be on your body. Your body's not going to be able to handle it that well. And so, people keep arguing that, oh, it's hormetic. Okay, which ones? Okay, so cyanide, is that hormetic? At what level? At what dose? How much can you eat? And put that in practical terms. How much cassava can I eat? How much bitter cassava can I eat? How much sweet cassava can I eat? How many almonds can I eat? Because almonds have cyanide too. Bitter almonds are the inside of a peach stone, right? It looks like an almond. It's like a shriveled up almond. That's called a bitter almond, and that's used in like baking. They extract the almond extract from that. And they put like marzipan and things like that to get that really strong almondy taste. That's cyanide. That's cyanide. Yeah. So it's so much cyanide. So one or two of those bitter almonds can kill you. Damn. Now the thing is that it's this is a defense mechanism, right? Because it's actually sequestered in ways that it's actually not just sitting there with a whole bunch of cyanide in it. There's separate chemicals that when the plant is crushed, it releases those two chemicals, they bind together and make cyanide. And so that's how, and there's a whole bunch of different things like that. Like in, it's the chemical in broccoli that say is just so good. I'm just dropping
sulforaphane.
Yes, exactly. And so, this is so good for you. It causes, it causes this effect to bring up all these, antioxidants and things like that. It's like, yeah, right. Those things are responding to the sulforaphane to try to clear it from your body. Yeah. All right. So that's not good. I mean, maybe there's an added effect, a bonus after that as it sticks around for a bit and maybe clears up some other things. Maybe you could cause that hormetic, but no one's proven that. Yeah. Your body's responding to this to try to clear this stuff away from your body because this stuff is toxic, and it's so toxic that the broccoli doesn't keep it just floating around. It's again in two different molecules, and when it's crushed, so when it's being eaten and macerated by an animal, it releases, and those form this sulforaphane to poison the animal that's eating that bite.
That's so interesting.
Right? Because you bite that bite and you chew that up, and it releases sulforaphane right there in your mouth.
Have you heard of Dr. Rhonda Patrick? Yeah, My Fitness. She says when you cook broccoli, the sulforaphane dies out, and that you should add mustard seeds
to get more sulforaphane.
Yeah.
So,
said that on the largest podcast in the world, by the way.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So I saw much of that on Joe Rogan, and look, all due respect to her, I mean, it's like I don't think she's, coming at this from like bad intents or anything like that.
No.
But I think that she's a bit misguided in some of these things. And
I think you're correct in saying that.
I think this is a good example of inside the box thinking.
Yeah.
The box is the textbooks and all these sorts of things, and it's just like this is how it is, and you're just learning that, and so and it's just like, well, this is what I learned in my PhD, therefore that's the only thing that could possibly be true.
Spreading the science of the path that you've already taken.
Yeah, exactly. And so innovation and discovery and progress comes from outside of the box thinking like, okay, well, what if this isn't actually true?
Yes.
Or maybe there's something else that changes the story, right? And you have to do that. So her, little dissertation on how bad, why the carnivore diet isn't a great idea, just struck me in a number of different ways.
What was the most stunning part?
So the thing is, some of the things that she was saying was that she's a big sort of calories in, calories out sort of person, which is insane because I mean these things are. Yeah. Well, I mean, the fact of the matter is that these things you cannot reduce these things down to their caloric content, right? First of all, calories are you burn something, and you get out heat energy, and that's not we're not combustion engines. We're not like putting in fuel and then burning these things. These are complex organic molecules that have complex or chemical interactions in your body, and so different amino acids have different interactions in your body. It's not just like 4 kilocalories per gram. Like, well, that's all that is. And I was like, well, no. Well, some is glutamine, some is carnitine, some is all these alanine, all these sorts of things. And they have different responses in your body, and they trigger different genes and epigenetic effects in your body, and
breaks down in a certain way too. Yeah. So you're getting different density of calories inside of the body of the breakdown of the food that you're eating in the first place.
Yeah. And I mean, think about fructose. Fructose is a carbohydrate. Yeah. Well, it's a sugar. Well, 4 kilocalories per gram. That's all that matters, right? Well, except that fructose is broken down the same way to the same byproducts as alcohol. The other sugars don't do that, right? So that is a different thing, right? And all the different fatty acids, it's like, well, it's just fatty acids. There's just fatty acids. And that's why you could argue that, no, canola oil is the same as beef tallow. Like, the hell it is. It's like, well,
is anybody arguing that?
Those idiots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
I mean, maybe not all of them, but I mean, a lot of them are saying, "Oh, no, it's not that big a deal," right?
Yeah, I think there's enough evidence in the literature.
There's a ton, but the problem is that there's conflicting data in the literature that's produced by the industry, like industry research. And the one thing you can trust with industry research is that it will support the industry that funded it. Because if it doesn't, because if it doesn't support the industry, it doesn't get published.
Of course.
Right? And so they'll design it in a way to get the desired results.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't get the desired results, they just won't publish it. Ansel Keys did this. He was an absolute bastard. He was bought and paid for by the sugar companies and falsified data and published fraudulent studies to make it appear as if cholesterol was causing heart disease when it was really sugar, and tried to exonerate sugar and say it was safe. It was an empty calorie, and a bunch of Harvard professors did the same thing. And they were one of the
LDL.
Yeah, and one of those professors was named head of the USDA, and he was the one who authored and published the 1977 USDA declaration that said that cholesterol caused heart disease. That was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association in 2016. Their actual contracts were in that. We know what they got paid. They got paid $6,500, which is the equivalent of $50,000 today. So they got a mid-sized sedan out of the deal. And they completely screwed the health of the world, right? Ansel Keys was one of these douchebags. I absolutely hate him. And
Is he still alive?
No, thank God. Oh. But actually, unfortunately, so we can't kill him. You know, and so he can't stand. Be held responsible for his actions. I mean, he was an absolute monster.
That's a menace.
You know, I think he's probably responsible for millions and millions of deaths, and certainly hundreds of millions of people getting sick that never needed to. And it really pisses me off. And he did some studies where he actually, we'll do an intervention and we'll reduce the amount of LDL cholesterol and putting, unsaturated fats and, exchange that out. And they found that, that's funny. We reduced LDL cholesterol and heart disease went up. Heart attacks went up. Cardiovascular deaths went up. And so what did? They responsibly published that and go like, gosh, guys, it looks like I was wrong about this. No, they buried the study.
Oh, yeah.
And they buried it for decades. It's only been recently uncovered. And there was a number of studies. Some was buried for 17 years. Some were buried for 40 years. And so, some of these things only came out in the last 10 years. But there have been large randomized controlled trials showing that if you reduce LDL cholesterol, that it doesn't improve health. And in fact, some cases, it actually makes things worse and causes more heart attacks, strokes, and death. And that's with tens of thousands of people.
Because they're just carrier proteins, right?
Yeah, that's right. And we make them. They're important. And you can damage them. Yeah. You can damage them with high blood sugar, with seed oils, and other oxidative stressors. But that's not the cholesterol causing the problem. That's you damaging your body, and it damages the cholesterol. I think of it more as a smoke and not the fire. Yeah. This is an indicator of damage and harm to your body, just like HbA1c is a marker of your metabolic health and your sugar control over the course of 3 months. This is how we test diabetics and things like that to see how good their blood sugar control is. And in fact, even with the damaged cholesterol, there's a ton of studies that actually show no correlation, literally no correlation between higher LDL cholesterol and heart disease. In fact, some show an inverse correlation. So higher LDL cholesterol, the lower your heart disease and heart attack rate is. And saturated fat, the Journal of the American College of Cardiology actually published in 2020 a very large review looking at all the major recent meta-analyses and all the best evidence going back decades. And they showed that saturated fat, there was no safe upper limit on the amount of saturated fat you could eat. You just eat as much as you want. It had no correlation with heart disease. And in fact, they found an inverse correlation with stroke.
I believe that.
So the more saturated fat you eat, the lower your stroke risk is. Wow. The less saturated fat you eat, the higher your stroke rate is. And so, a lot of these studies, a lot of these big studies and meta-analyses and randomized controlled trials show that LDL cholesterol is actually good for you. It's actually beneficial for you, and can be harmful if you reduce it, right? And people with elderly people over the age of 65, the higher LDL cholesterol that they have, the longer they live, the healthier they live, and the less chance they have of getting dementia, Alzheimer's, and less likely they are to go to a nursing home, right? So, and it's directly correlated with longevity, right? And so this is just not what we've been told that it was. And so I sort of lost where I started with that, but it was a bit of a riff. But but the thing is that
That is wild, though, man.
Yeah, but there's so many just falsehoods perpetrated on the world.
Yeah.
And it was for money. You know, the sugar companies trying to protect their interests, and they paid off these researchers to do that for them.
Do you think it's still happening? Do you think that...
Jesus Christ, yes.
Yeah?
No, more so now.
More journals are like pushing publications through just to get certain things that... Oh, like pharmaceuticals,
Yeah. Well, I mean, think about that. Think about the FDA, the USDA, the CDC. You know, the people that work there and high up in those institutions, they all end up getting very cushy jobs in the private sector for these companies, and you know, they've already sort of invaded academia decades ago. Literally, I mean, like nearly 100 years ago, and those large academics are the ones getting these government appointed positions, right? And so they have these sleeper agents in there, you know, and that was the thing. One of those was Harvard professors that they paid off was named head of the USDA. He was the one who said that cholesterol causes heart disease, stop eating it, right? And so that changed the dynamic of the world, right? And he was bought and paid for. We know that. We know that this was fraudulent, not just false, not just incorrect, but fraud. Damn. Bought and paid for fraud. We have hard evidence of that. That is not up for discussion. That is a matter of record.
It's the thing is appointed liability, though, right? It's like, can they be made liable for these things?
God, I hope so. I mean, the thing is that it's so far away. I mean, it's all different people now, you know, and they probably changed hands and changed the company's names and things like that so many times over. Who knows? But you know, I mean, the people, if they defrauded people and they're still alive, I mean, I think they should be criminally prosecuted for sure. I think a lot of them are dead now, unfortunately, so we can't, like, you know, kill them ourselves. But like, you know, but it's you know, I think it's probably worse now because they know they can get away with it. Yeah, and they know they can cover it up. And so the funniest,
they've done it before, so they know how.
You remember the tobacco documents? You know, the tobacco companies for decades they were saying, "Oh no, there's no research that says that tobacco causes heart disease or is addictive, or we have this study and this research that shows that."
Go ahead.
Right. And then, you know, sort of 40 years into it, someone leaked out a whole bunch of documents and internal memos showing that they knew damn well that this stuff was addictive and carcinogenic and harmful, and they were just doctoring up a whole bunch of crap and paying off a bunch of, you know, corrupt bastards to do it. And so they got fined like hundreds of millions of dollars, or maybe even billions. I think it was hundreds of billions of dollars anyway. Buttload of money.
But they're still operating.
They're still operating, and guess what they did right after that?
What?
They bought all the major food distributors.
Oh.
So all of the tobacco companies are running all the processed food companies now, right? And
they know how to do
things. They know how to do this shit. And so, you know, we have the sugar documents now. Those were published in JAMA in 2016. So that's a matter of record as well. But it has not stopped there. They are practiced at it, and they're better at it now because they know how not to get caught now, because they've made their mistakes and now they're going to cover them up more. And now they're just going to buy off more politicians and things like that if they have to. So right now, Coca-Cola spends 11 times the amount of money on nutritional research than the NIH.
No.
Just Coca-Cola. So where do you think those studies are pointing? They're pointing towards sugar being safe, sugar being fine. Oh, actually, you lose weight drinking more sugar. I'm like, okay, no. Yeah. You know, and, you know, so, but that's the thing, it muddies the water. And so then you look at this and you have all these studies that say, well, no, sugar is really bad, fructose is really bad. Well, all these ones just say, oh, well, it's not that bad at all. Well, I found this study. Well, you can get a study that says anything because there's a lot of invested interests out there. And so you can sort of get anything published almost. And then you say, oh, well, look, we got 30 studies saying it's bad for you, 30 studies saying it's good for you. It's just a toss-up. I guess we just don't know. I guess we just need to do more work. And then so that favors the industry, because, you know, it's like, well, I guess we shouldn't change anything because we don't have enough information yet. Well, no, you have 30 studies that show very clearly this shit is bad for you. And then you have these ones over here.
We have one crisp one, though.
Yeah. And so, you know, it's and so that's why they do it. They try to muddy the waters.
Of course.
And so that's why you have these online debates or just normal debates. No one does real debates anymore. But, someone making a video and attack, oh, well, I found that someone did like a response video to a video I did and that I presented at a medical conference just talking about all the different toxins in plants and things like that. Oh. And so is this vegan guy who did that. And he just cherry picked out. He just tried to find any study that sort of went counter to what I was saying. Ignoring the 50 other studies and articles that absolutely corresponded with exactly what I was saying, and just like the textbooks that my information had come out of. And so, oh well, there's this thing on oxalates. Oh, well, look at this, and like And I talked about like phytic acid and how this can bind nutrients, and we don't have the physiology to break these things apart and digest them and absorb them. He's like, oh well, look at this. And it said that some of these microbes in the microbiome, they can break it down. So well, that's wrong. It's like, dude, that's in the colon, man. So they get down to the colon. So if you have the bacteria requisite, it's in the colon.
Doing like the gorillas do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so then you eat this stuff. It gets in the colon, and it breaks the stuff down. But then you don't absorb it in the colon. You have to absorb it in the small intestine, and so that's useless. We don't have the physiology, and even he said it. It was microbiome. It was bacteria that did that. We don't do that, right? So it can't get in our body. We can't absorb it and then utilize that, right? So what I said still stands, but he would just try to find these little weird things. And one thing I was talking about, like, potatoes and things like that, and how these things have more solanine depending on if they get exposed to light. They can get UV light, can make them turn green. So people sometimes get taught. I was certainly taught as a kid, you have to keep potatoes in a cold, dark place, cold, dry, dark place, and that was because if they got exposed to light, they turned green. They were poison. You can't eat them. They went bad, and that's what they say. Oh, they're bad if you do that. Well, what does that mean? That means they're poisonous and they can kill you. And people actually still die from eating potatoes when they don't follow that. I mean, potatoes, right? But if they turn green, they can be deadly.
Wow.
And if they start growing a root, that can kill you.
Is that right?
Yeah. And so you have to cut the whole eye out, or you just throw them out. Oh, wow. Right? Because they're bad. What does that bad mean? It means they're poisonous. They're deadly poisonous. They're already poisonous. But they're poisonous over decades, as opposed to acutely poisonous. They'll kill you that day. Right? And they will if they get into that point. And so, I just pointed out that fact that anyone can look up. And he was just like, oh, yeah, potatoes. Okay. And I was saying, you should peel these things because that's where the barrier protection, that's where most of these things are. And that's what we used to do. We used to peel potatoes, always. And we used to vine ripen tomatoes, blanch them, take the skin off, and take the seeds out for hundreds of years. And then people were like, oh no, that's where all the nutrients are. Yeah, that's where all the poison is too.
If you ever went over someone's house and they had like potato mash or something like that, and
I just punch them.
And they had the skins in there still, you'd be like, what's wrong with you, man?
Well, but a lot of people do, right?
Yeah, because that's where the nutrients is, man.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
What the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, but it's also where the poison is.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And whether or not the nutrients are in there, I mean, that's just something that someone's thrown out there. Maybe not though, because that's just something that people do this. They hear something, and because it fits their narrative. Folklore. Well, because exactly, and because it fits their narrative and what they want to believe, they don't ask for any evidence of it. So there's no evidence either provided or asked for. So they just look at that and just go, oh, okay, great. On my podcast, on my YouTube channel, things like that. Like, I put links for things. Like, I want people to know where I'm getting this from. And maybe they look at it and they look like, yeah, you know what? I got a different story out of what you wrote there. Fine. That's great. It's up for interpretation. But that's what I got out of these sorts of things. Yes. And so I try to show my work. It's what you do in school. It's like, how'd you get the answer? Show your work. Don't just say like, oh, 86, you got it off of Jenny's paper. Write out how you got there so that people can check that and make sure you're not just guessing.
The common people aren't looking for standard information until things go wrong, though. You know
that too, yeah.
Then until you're unhealthy, you're looking for any kind of source of like savior. But like when you're just like, mashed potatoes, skin in, skin out, nobody's really giving a shit until it all goes to the fucking wolves. Yeah. And so, they're just saying, oh, well, that's where the nutrients are. Okay, great. I have no reason not to believe that. But you never ask. I was like, oh, really? Where did you get that from? I always ask. And I always say, oh, well, what about when someone says this? Well, did they prove that was the case? Well, like,
did they show any evidence? Did they show you a study? No, they just said it. Okay, ask them where they're getting it from.
Yeah.
Even doctors and things like that. People say, well, my doctor says that I have to do X, Y, and Z for these reasons. Like, okay, ask him what he's basing that on. Ask him what studies. Ask him what research. Ask him, can you show him?
Yeah.
And they can't because they don't. It's just this stuff is made up. Some of this stuff, and so I was pointing that out about potatoes, and this guy, in order to counter me, trotted out this, I guess the only thing you could find was a study that said if you're eating a standard, food pyramid diet, and your carbohydrates are coming from potatoes or they're coming from
grains.
What were they? Yeah, some sort of grain, like bread or something like that.
The best kind.
Something. Anyway, so another carb source, right?
Yeah.
And you're saying, oh, well, this study showed that actually the group that was eating just the food pyramid stuff was eating potatoes instead of like, bread or something like that. Well, that one was better. I was like, yeah, okay. So that proves that potatoes don't have any solanine in them. You idiot. You know? I mean, like, okay, try eating those on their own and only eating those
without cooking them,
and compare that to someone who only eats meat and actually eats what they're supposed to eat, or maybe eating meat and potatoes instead of just meat.
Yeah.
That would show you some information that might be useful in this conversation. But like what you showed was that potatoes are better than the alternative carb source. I'm like, I don't care. That's not what we asked. And it's again with this hormetic thing, they don't ask for any information. They don't ask for any proof. They don't provide any either.
They just want to be made right. That's it.
And they just say, and it's just good enough, and it sounds good enough. It's like, oh, okay, hormesis, okay. But again, there's a million different chemicals, and there's thousands in every different plant that we eat.
Yeah.
Which one of those are hormetic?
Mm-hmm.
At what level? At what dose? How do you know you're getting that dose? And how do you know how much is too much? So the idea of hormesis is too much is bad. Yeah. So you have this grace period. Now, not everything that's bad for you has a hormetic dose. There's some things that are only bad. So you have to be very clear and distinct. And also, if you're talking about hormesis, you're talking about something that is potentially bad. And so over a certain amount, it is bad. And so you need to know what that level is. And so they're not doing that. They're just saying, yeah, just eat plants, whatever. Okay, that's not very helpful. Yeah. Because you're not saying which plants at what dose. Just eat this plant.
Variable plants, yeah.
Variable plants with variable amount of oxalates, variable amount of many different things. So if you're just eating a whole bunch of spinach, well, spinach is good for you. People eat more spinach, do better.
Yeah.
Okay, compared to what? Because people just eat more spinach than compared to a processed food diet. Maybe, maybe not. Depends on how much spinach they're eating, right? Because you can get people that get serious oxalate poisoning from eating a whole bunch of spinach.
Yeah.
And Sally Norton was actually saying, she's like, I'd rather see someone on a processed food diet than a high oxalate diet. Yeah. Right? Because high oxalates can destroy your life. It's worse than sugar. It's worse than these seed oils. To her, that's what she was saying. And she was saying that she would rather see someone on a processed food diet than a high oxalate plant-based diet, right? Because oxalates are that toxic. Wow. And she's speaking from experience. It literally ruined her life, and she was like debilitated and crippled throughout college and her 20s and 30s. I mean, she was literally like crippled, and she, was very, 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 very sick.
That's some scary shit, man.
Yeah, and she had a master's degree in nutrition from an Ivy League college.
What the fuck?
And so she was always worried about eating right and all that sort of thing, which is why she got this degree. Yeah. Right? She's like, this is what I want to study. I'm all into this. Just eating plant based, all blah 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 blah. And it was killing her. It was actually killing her. Man. And so
I feel like that's kind of like the standard thing that's happening at the moment is we get so much information on like these different things. Like just because it's a good color doesn't mean it's healthy.
No. And what does that mean? They say, well, we want a wide variety of eat the rainbow. It's like, okay, so eat Skittles, taste the rainbow, right? So, what a silly thing to say, because there are a lot of different things that can cause plant to be yellow. Yeah. Do we need yellow? We just need the color yellow. Yeah, or do we need certain nutrients that sometimes display as yellow, but maybe don't in other plants? And maybe the yellow in this plant is not the same as the yellow in that plant, and that yellow is actually not something we need.
Why does the grade of photosynthesis have anything to do with it?
Yeah, and that's another one. I was so funny. There was a couple weeks where people were doing this and it sort of died out because it was absurd. But people were asking me, it's like, okay, but if you don't eat plants, where do you get your chlorophyll from? Like, do you need chlorophyll?
It's chlorophyll.
Yeah, and it was just like, and they were like, well, but don't you need that? I'm like, says who?
Yeah.
And they're like,
have you ever
yeah, I don't know
Googled what chlorophyll is, bro?
And so, it's like, but how do you get chlorophyll? Like, you need chlorophyll. I'm like, but do you though?
Yeah.
It's like, who says we need chlorophyll and what's the evidence for that?
Yeah.
And then they go like, damn it, I don't know. And they go look around. They're like, I can't find anything. I'm like, yeah, you don't need chlorophyll.
We're not making endogenous chlorophyll, man.
No.
Yeah.
You absolutely don't need chlorophyll. Maybe there's some things in chlorophyll that might be good for you, but that's like with any cell.
Of course.
Right? There are things in living organisms that are good for other living organisms. That's why living organisms eat other living organisms.
Yeah.
Right? Not all things can get energy from the sun. They're heterotrophs. We're heterotrophs. All animals are heterotrophs. All animals have to feed on other life.
Yes.
Be that plant, animal, or so on. Right? And so, that's just the laws of nature. You have to eat something. And so you're going to get nutrients out of these things, but you're also going to get the bad with the good.
Yes.
And a lot of those good things are sequestered in ways that we can't access. They're not bioavailable. And, but there's nothing in plants that we have to have that we cannot get from meat. But there are a number of things in meat that we have to have that we cannot get from plants or fungus or any other form of life. We have to get it from meat.
Very well said.
And so to me, when we're talking about definitions of things, well, humans are omnivores. Well, in the sense that we can eat more plants relatively safely than other animals that are more sensitive, like felines and canines, who like felines really can't handle basically any plants. They will all kill them. They're all inedible, mostly inedible to felines. And canines, you give a dog chocolate, it dies, right?
Yeah.
So, that's because that is toxic to a dog, or like nightshades, tomatoes, and things like that, or the tomato plant, the leaves especially, are very toxic to dogs. And there are a number of different plants that won't kill us, that will kill a dog, that will kill a cat. Hey everyone, if you need a little extra help getting started on a carnivore diet, and my online resources that I have for free aren't enough for you, you can go to www.howtocarnivore.com and sign up for a 30-day carnivore challenge, where you'll have online resources, group support, weekly Zoom meetings, as well as the ability to chat live with myself, Simon Lewis, and the others in the challenge who can help you and support you and give you extra advice and help you along the way. So if that sounds like something that would be beneficial to you, then please go to howtocarnivore.com and sign up. All right. Thanks, guys. We'll see you there.
So the argument is like, just because we can,
right,
doesn't mean it's optimal.
That's it. And that's exactly where I'm coming from, is the optimization, right? And that's, again, comes back to the point that there are no two animals of the same species, no two members of the same species that have different optimal diets. Now, there are different members of the same species, like in humans, that are better or less equipped to eat suboptimal food. So like people of European descent, like yourself and myself, we do better with grains and cultivated plants and crops than the native Australians, than the Native Americans, and even sub-Saharan Africans, things like that. They didn't have cultivation of crops as long as other people.
Even exposure to alcohol is different.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
I've heard of that.
And so, that's going to be a difference, but those are all suboptimal things. Those are all survival foods. And maybe that gives an advantage, to you're stuck in a castle and you're being besieged for 3 years and you can't grow food, but you have buttload of grain in the stores and you're just, okay, we survive it. You can survive on it. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that you're living optimally. And that would give us a survival advantage. Absolutely. And like, a big cat, like a lion or something like that, if it doesn't get a kill, it's going to die.
Yeah. It ain't eating the grain in the castle.
But we know what we can eat.
Yeah.
And so we can eat other things as well. So we don't get a kill, we can still survive. And that obviously is a survival advantage, but that does not mean that's optimal.
Yes.
And so if you say, oh, we're omnivores because we can eat these things, okay, well, we can eat a lot of things that we definitely don't need. We can get essential nutrients and minerals and vitamins like zinc, copper, iron, and magnesium from eating dirt. right? And like pregnant women who are like so anemic or so iron deficient, probably because they're on a plant-based diet, they go out and they get what's called pica, which is they just eat things that are not food.
Yeah.
And they'll eat dirt, and your dirt just tastes like they have to eat. They just feel compelled to eat dirt, and they eat it compulsively. And so, that's not food. Just because we can get nutrients out of dirt and we get, calories, you have to have calories, right? So you get those from a can of Coca-Cola, right? So we can eat dirt and Coca-Cola and take a multivitamin. That's not food, right?
Really? That was like my diet for the last 3 years.
And so, but that's the thing, so just because we can extract nutrients out of dirt does not make us dirtivores, right? And so, I just
women by that name.
And so I think it just depends on your definition of terms. To me, an omnivore means that you either not only just you can eat these things, because cats can eat some grains and things like that. Dogs can eat some of these plant-based crap, and that's what's in the kibble, and that's what's making them more sick and dying younger. Same with cats. But just because they can do that does not make them omnivores. Now, cats can do that, but they're still termed obligate carnivores because there are very few plants that they can eat safely. And they really do need to eat meat. And they need to get those nutrients from meat. Well, I would consider us in the same category because, what I think of it as an actual obligate omnivore is something who has to eat some plants because there's nutrients they have to get from plants, and they have to eat meat because there's nutrients in meat they have to get. So they have to eat both. Or they can get equal nutrition from either. We do not fit in either of those two categories. And so if you're thinking of a strict definition of what an omnivore is, or what an obligate omnivore is, someone who has to eat both or can eat both, you have to be very careful with those definitions. And so I think because you have to eat meat, you can't get away from it. You have to eat meat. There are nutrients there that you have to have.
Essential.
And there's nothing in plants that you have to have that you can't already get from meat.
Yes.
We are obligated to eat meat. We don't do well on plants. We're not optimized on plants. So I think that makes us obligate carnivores.
Yes.
Right. And so, that's just my opinion on it anyway.
Dude, that was a lot of information.
Sorry.
It was really, really good. I wholeheartedly agree that when it came down to me doing the carnivore diet, the benefits definitely outweighed me going back to a regular diet. And when I was thinking about how my body reacted after going back onto a regular diet, it was not worth it.
Right.
It was worth staying on the carnivore. Now, let me just tell you, I didn't finish what happened.
Yeah.
So they put me on immunosuppressants
to
stop my corticosteroids, to stop my immune system attacking itself. It wasn't that.
Okay.
It wasn't that. They missed an infection.
Ah, dude. And they gave you an immunosuppressant.
Yes.
Fun. So
So my health just went, phew.
Jesus.
And then I ended up getting rushed into the hospital for surgery like 2 weeks ago.
Oh my God. I'm sorry, dude.
No. It's good. It's good. Because I was like, I fucking told you.
Yeah.
And like I did what you said to do. Like, ask your doctor why are you doing this?
Yeah.
And I did, and he couldn't give me an answer. And I was like, I feel like I couldn't eat anything but bone broth. Like I literally was reacting to everything. Like my stomach would feel bad just on steak. I think it was because of that reactive thing that you were talking about. So I was just like, okay, I'm going to figure this out. And then when I got rushed into the hospital for the infection, and that gets cleared out, I'm good again. I don't react to anything. But now I'm going back to carnivore.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to.
Well, I'm really sorry that happened. I mean, that's a big miss. Yeah, that's pretty nasty. I was going to say, with the Crohn's issues, putting people on prednisolone, like corticosteroids.
That's what I'm on, yeah.
There was a study that actually looked at putting people with Crohn's disease on, if people don't know, that's an inflammatory bowel disease that affects any part of the intestinal or the alimentary tract from the lips down to the anus, and it causes huge ulcerations and damage, and it's very painful and very uncomfortable and can cause other sort of issues around the body. And some people can have bloody diarrhea 20-30 times a day, and it's really nasty. And they get
agree.
Yeah. And they can get it's very horrible to deal with. And there was a study that looked at putting people on elemental diet, which is just pure nutrients and nothing else, and versus prednisolone, putting them on these corticosteroids. In America, we use prednisone, same sort of action.
Mm-hmm.
And they found that the people on an elemental diet, just getting the nutrients, that got them into remission faster and better than the prednisolone or prednisone, right? So just eliminating out this crap in your diet was better than the steroids, right? So what does that mean? That means there's something in that food that's causing that, right? That's kicking that off. There was another study, it was a controlled trial that looked at people just eliminating carbohydrates and fiber from their diet, again with Crohn's disease, and they found that the group that took away fiber and carbohydrates, so a ketogenic diet with no fiber, that they stayed in remission on average 51 months, right? So over 4 years.
Damn, man.
Without medications.
Shit.
And the group that didn't remove carbohydrates and fiber stayed in remission on average 0 months.
Wow.
Big difference, right? So, that, what is that saying? That's saying that something in the carbs and the fiber, maybe one of each or both, or one of them or both, that is causing this to get worse, right? So it's precipitating this autoimmune attack on your body. And, people talk about, fiber's so good for you. Ask anyone with Crohn's or ulcerative colitis what fiber does to them. It absolutely tears them up. Exactly. It's not good for you. In fact, the only thing that we found, there was a large study with over 2,000 patients, did colonoscopies on all these patients and diagnosed diverticular disease. So it's the outpouching failure of the distal colon. And this can become infected, very, very serious. You can get that resected, have big problems. People die from this. And they found the only things that correlated with higher levels of diverticulosis were, first of all, age, which we always know. And in medical school, you're taught after the age of 50, your age is the percent likelihood that you'll get diverticulosis, right? So 50 is 50%, 85 is 85%.
Yeah.
And so, but they found that age aside, the only things that correlated with your risk of getting diverticulosis was higher fiber intake and more bowel motions a week. So namely more than 2 bowel motions a day, or really more than 15 bowel motions a week.
Wow.
So averaging more than 2 a day, right? Constipation was not one of them.
Really?
Meat was not one of them. Fat was not one of them.
Jesus.
Right? Only fiber and more increased bowel motions a day, more than 15 per week. And they were actually strongly correlated with them. And so, saying that, well, fiber's so good for your gut. Like, based on what? Because based on the actual studies with actual people and actual patients and actual outcomes, it's worse. Yeah. Right? You're getting diverticulosis, you're getting Crohn's, you're kicking off ulcerative colitis. There was an interventional trial, I think it's really the only one that they've done with fiber, only looking at fiber as a specific variable. They had 4 groups. All these people were symptomatic. They had gut GI issues, stomach upset, pain, gas, bloating, things like that. So they were already symptomatic.
Right.
So they took all these people. They were all eating a certain amount of fiber, and they said, okay, we'll split you up into 4 groups. One will, just be the control group. You just keep eating exactly what you're eating, keep eating the same amount of fiber that you're eating. And then one group increase the amount of fiber that you're eating. One group decrease the amount of fiber that you're eating. One group eliminate the fiber, right? Small study, about like 60 some patients. They found the exact opposite of what you'd expect from these people pushing fiber. And
as you can imagine.
And so the people that ate more fiber actually got worse. People who stayed the same, stayed the same. People who ate less fiber got better. People who eliminated fiber completely resolved their symptoms. Every one of them, right? And and then you have the Crohn's patients. You eat fiber, you get worse. Yes. You eliminate fiber, you stay in remission, and removing carbohydrates as well. So some people will argue, well, that's you're changing 2 variables there. You don't know which variable is which. Fair enough, but it's down to 2 variables, and quite a lot of carbohydrates come with fiber.
Do you know what the first thing they offered me after they gave me the diagnosis in the hospital?
What?
Sandwiches.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're like, we have whole grain.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Man.
And did they talk to you about resting the bowel?
No, they gave me a Dr. AB diet, which was it was like bread, rice. It's just pretty much a list of grains to eat.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I don't think this would help me. So I just jumped online and did some like formidable studies on like bone broth and things that like most people don't react to.
Yeah.
And yeah, kind of.
What's funny though, because when I was on my general surgery rotations, like it was we put people on a low residue diet all the time. Low residue, what does that mean? That means something that's not causing a lot of things to have to be excreted, right? So fiber is number one on that, because you cannot break it down. You cannot get nutrition from it. It's coming out. You put it in your mouth, it's coming out your ass. Like that's it. That's what's happening.
Usually
next.
the same weight.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so you don't want that. You want to rest the bowel. You don't want the bowel to work so hard. You don't want a bunch of stuff coming through and having to move it and peristalsis it through. You don't want that. And so they put the people on a low to no fiber diet in order to rest the bowel. But I thought fiber was good for you. It's supposed to benefit the bowel, right? So wouldn't that be helpful? Wouldn't that be like, hey, you have a bowel issue, you need to eat a lot of fiber, because fiber is really good for your gut. It's going to help your gut heal.
Out.
Yeah, and it helps you. It's good for you, but it's not actually. So when we actually have a problem, the medical community actually well understands the fact that fiber is actually contraindicated. Wow. And then so you take people off fiber, and then as soon as they're better, like, okay, get on a high fiber diet. Wait, what? Why?
Let's just reverse all the stuff that you've just been through.
Yeah, and so it's very funny. But that's some of the things like talking about Rhonda Patrick. Some of the things that like I just think that we're just not seeing clearly, right? Because with Rhonda Patrick, she talks about like the sort of calories in, calories out. They say, well, when people are on a carnivore diet, like any sort of elimination diet, where they're sort of eliminating out a whole bunch of things, they tend to eat less over time. Yeah. And so that's all that is. That's why they're losing weight. It's just calories in, calories out. Well, first of all, she never proved that. She never actually showed a direct relationship between that. But also, she's missing the most significant point, which is people are naturally regulating their caloric intake on a carnivore diet. They're naturally just saying,
I'm just too satiating.
Well, that's it. It's just like, this is how much I want. It tastes good when my body wants it, and then it stops tasting good. Yeah. And that's your body saying, yep, we've had enough. Like every single animal on earth, they know how much to eat and they know when to stop. And I've never seen a fat giraffe. I've never seen a fat lion. I've never seen a fat zebra. People say, oh, well, that's because they're running out in the wild all the day. Not in the zoo.
Yeah, true.
They live in a box the size of this room. This is the definition of a sedentary lifestyle, and yet they're ripped. They look like they're on steroids, right? Why is that? Because they're eating what they're supposed to eat. Yes. Right? And they know how to. And obviously they're being given a certain amount. But
I've never had a steak and it was moreish. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
yeah. The first bite for sure. Yeah. But by the end of that steak, if it's a decent sized ribeye, you're like, oh,
I'm done. Can't do it.
Can't do it anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's it, right? Because the difference between positive feedback from something that's good for you, like meat, and something that's bad for you, like drugs that are addictive, like sugar, is that if it's something good for you, that positive feedback lessens, right? So the less your body wants it, the less that positive feedback is, right? And it gets to a point you don't get any positive feedback. And you just go like, I'm not really enjoying this. You can force yourself, and I have had patients that they're just used to eating more, and they're like, oh, I hate this because it takes me 2 hours to finish a meal. It's like, no, well, did you hate it the whole time, or did it always taste bad, or at the beginning did it taste good? It's like, well, yeah, at the beginning it tasted really good, but I got halfway through the meal and I was just like, just tasted horrible. It took 2 hours to finish the rest of it. It's like, to finish it. It's like, no, you were finished when it stopped tasting good. Yeah. That was your body saying, hey, you don't eat it anymore. And it was screaming at you, don't eat it. And that's why I say eat as much as you want to eat. Yeah. Right. But you clearly didn't want to eat it because you're saying, I didn't want to do that. I hate it. Right. Then don't. Then don't do it. Eat what tasted good. Yeah. And then stop. And but with drugs, that positive feedback's always there. It keeps coming back, comes stronger. The more you do it, the more you want to do it. Yeah. Things like that. So that's how you know that positive feedback's okay. And so Dr. Patrick didn't catch that, which I think is a big miss. I think that's a very important point, that we are naturally able to regulate the amount of nutrients coming in our body, which you would expect if this is our natural, biologically appropriate diet, right? We should have physiological functions, yes, and signals that say like, hey, this is it. This is all we need, or we need more of this, or we need less of this. We need more of this other nutrient. Like women who eat dirt because they're so iron deficient and anemic that their baby's going to die. Yeah. And so they're like, you need to get this in you now. And all of a sudden dirt tastes amazing because of the iron content, right? And so they eat it. And she had a number of other points that I think that really just missed the mark. Well, I mean, look, she's defending her position, and she's allowed to, but I didn't find her arguments very compelling. I found that they were very straightforward answers and arguments and counters to what she had to say.
But also, like, having a variable diet for that long, say you've been on it for, well, how old is she? 30, 35, 40?
I think she's in her 40s, yeah.
Something like that.
40s, 50s maybe, I don't know.
If you've been on it like a variable diet your whole life and then learnt into that as well, like really, you learned so much about it that you went down a scientific... Is she an MD?
No, she's a PhD.
PhD. She got a PhD in this shit. Mm-hmm. She wants to solidify those arguments, and she will do that at every cost. And I think, she has a right to do that, obviously. But whether it's better for humanity to be professing these things without questioning, I'm not sure.
Well, I think you always need to question them, and I think that's why you get people on as a debate, as friendly. And people used to actually debate. And they were friends, and they just disagreed, and they just said, "No, we're going to do this." But now it's just like if you disagree with someone, it's like a personal affront, and it's like a fight, and it's really annoying that that's the case, and people get so defensive of their position, that they don't actually, they don't think that you are in error, but in sin. Because you don't agree with them, you are a bad person. You are morally bankrupt.
That's the issue, though, with being married to your ideas, right? If you can't be manipulated, or not even manipulated, if you can't be malleable with your ideas and say, look, I could be wrong in this instant right now, and I'm open to new information coming in. People aren't like that these days. They're like, oh, I have a strong argument, and I'm going to stick by it. Yeah. And if they break my argument, this is going to be a completely different set of circumstances here, and I'm going to take it to heart rather than just see it as a debate.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we are sort of in that time where things are so hyper polarized that you can't actually have a disagreement. But I think that's one of the a good working definition of being open-minded is understanding the fact that two people can look at the same information and honestly and intelligently come to different conclusions. Yes. Because they have different information that they are influencing them in certain ways, and they have just different brains in their heads. Yeah. And they look at that and they be like, well, no, I don't think that that's the case because of X, Y, and Z. And the person says, well, I think it is the case because of B, C, and D. Yeah. And that's fine. But you get to discuss that, and you can talk about it, and you can do that in a very fruitful manner where everyone can benefit, and maybe you convince someone, maybe they convince you, and you both improve. But the people watching, they go like, I really found that very convincing. This is why we had political debates and things like that. Now they're just mudslinging events, Yeah. But they actually used to be real things,
where they would debate for hours on end in open public arenas. Yeah, I agree. They were fascinating back then. Yeah. But now it's 3-minute audible clips.
It's just sound bites. That's it. That's all they want. And you look back at the Abraham Lincoln presidential debates. Yeah, it was like first guy had an hour. Yeah, an hour.
A long time.
Right. The second guy got an hour and a half, and then the first guy got another half hour to rebut the other guy. And so
people were alert for that. That wasn't like a TikTok video you swipe up.
No,
they were there for the whole thing.
They were there for it. Yeah, and and then like with John F. Kennedy when he was then president. He debated with Nixon. That was actually kind of interesting because that was the first televised presidential debate, and he was very handsome and charming guy. Yeah, Nixon was not. No, and he was all sweaty and weird. Yeah, but.
He blew everyone's minds, and then they blew his mind.
And oh Jesus, and
had to do it.
And so,
But he was revolutionary, though.
yeah, but it was funny though, because the people who listened to the debates on the radio thought that Nixon won the debate.
Yeah.
The people who watched it on television thought Kennedy won the debate
Yeah.
because they were more impressed by his image.
Stature,
Yeah, and they thought Nixon was all sweaty and weird and all that sort of stuff. So it's quite an interesting thing. But JFK, when he was president, there was a guy who was, so JFK was a Democrat, and one of his best friends was a guy named Barry Goldwater, who was the senator from Arizona, and he was a Republican, and he was a libertarian, and he thought that, we should have these free market ideals and less government intervention and things like that. And to be fair, JFK, was a very small government compared to the Democrats now. And that's what Ronald Reagan said. He was a Democrat his whole life. In fact, he was so far to the left that the FBI was investigating him for communist ties and things like that. Jesus. And then he became, very, very, libertarian sort of person. And he says and he got vilified when he sort of went to the Republican Party. And he said, hey, I didn't leave the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party left me. I haven't changed my views. But you guys have kept moving and kept moving. I've stayed right here. Yeah. And so the party of JFK is a very different one than is alive today. But Barry Goldwater and he were very good friends. They were buddies, and they, their families vacationed together and things like that. And they would talk about because Barry Goldwater was going to run against JFK for his reelection. And they were talking about it, and they were smiling about it, and I can't wait for the debates. I really can't wait to get in there and talk about these things and really, come to grips with these issues. And JFK was like, yeah, this is going to be great. It's going to be really good. And then he died. He got assassinated, and then Lyndon Johnson took over.
Wasn't that Barry Goldwater tied in with the CIA? Have you heard about that?
Well, the assassination, the CIA sort of thing. I don't know too much about that, but I do know
I'm
that.
not saying it anymore then.
Yeah. But no, I don't know about that with Barry Goldwater. I mean, I have heard weird things about the CIA and how he was JFK was actually looking to he made a speech.
He wanted to pull it all down.
Yeah, he made a speech saying he was going to break it apart into 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the winds.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden he dies. The guy who killed him was he was a staunch communist hawk. He did not like communism. He was very much against the USSR and the communist countries. And he the guy who was Lee Harvey Oswald, who for all intents and purposes, said to assassinate him.
Then gets assassinated. He got shot, right?
I don't remember what happened to Lee Harvey Oswald.
And then it was his killer inside of the prison got acid to the gills during MK Ultra.
Jesus.
Yeah, and then went stark crazy.
Good Lord.
It's insane.
There's a lot of weird things going on. But he was that guy was a communist, and he, a communist sympathizer and went over to Russia and things like that. Lee Harvey Oswald did. So, on paper it looks pretty good. He was against USSR, and there was actual movement in America, this communist underground movement in America. They were like, we need to take over. This is such an important thing that we need to start killing politicians and leaders who are against this. And that they were said that everyone needs to buy a gun. Everyone needs to own a gun because when the time comes, we're gonna have to kill people in these certain positions and things like that to bring about communism, because that is so important that these people that we have to kill these people so that everyone else can benefit. It's like the ends justify the means sort of thing. And as Lenin said, you have to break a few. In regards to killing millions of people, he said, well, you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet.
Jesus. Back to Carnivore.
Exactly. Yeah.
I got to wrap this shit up, man.
Yeah, man.
We're gonna get out of here. Can we do this again?
Absolutely.
That was fucking awesome.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the fucking information's going to change more and more and more. And I hope you keep on the good fight with all this.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll do my best.
Dude, this is awesome. What a great fucking interview. Really, really good. How can people get in touch with you? Just as an ending?
Yeah. So, I'm active on social media. So like Instagram is Anthony Chaffee, MD, Chaffee spelled CHAFFE. And then my YouTube is the same thing, Anthony Chaffee, MD. Then my podcast is called The Plant Free MD, as you might guess. And I have other social media sort of tied up and all that as well that people can find through those links on those pages.
Awesome. Thank you very much, man.
Not a problem. Thank you for having me. Mr. Post was a patient of his that then went and founded a cereal company of his own. and very influential man, very influential. And he was also a bit of an inventor. So he invented a device that could pump water high speed. Exactly. Yeah. So so you can give himself a high powered enema, like 60 liters a minute.